begin our meeting. The Tuesday, March the 2nd, 2021 school board meeting held at Dunbar Middle School of the Lynchburg City School Board is now called to order. And in our calling of our meeting to order tonight, the chair would acknowledge the fact that our meeting here is being held at Dunbar, as explained in our last meeting, and that during the course of our meetings, we are observing our social distancing for board members and public attendees. We welcome the public's attendance in our public meetings and are making every effort to reduce the spread of COVID-19. So all of the precautionary measures that have been indicated, we thank you for observing those on tonight. Also, we would like you to know that we are streaming live via YouTube, and there will be a rebroadcast at the point that can happen on our Comcast cable channel 17 as we continue to go forward. Please visit our website for further information. Now moves us to section B of our agenda, and in that I am going to require a motion for action around the approval of electronic participation by a school board member. And might the board continuously be reminded that we may conduct any meeting except closed meetings at this time as outlined in policy BDC relative to BDD, wherein the public business is discussed and transacted through electronic communication means if, on or before the day of a meeting, a member of the school board notifies the chair that such member is unable to attend the meeting due to a temporary or permanent disability or other medical condition that prevents the member's physical attendance, and 2, the school board approves the member's participation by a majority vote of the members present at the primary or central meeting location. Tonight, the chair would be delighted to entertain a motion for the electronic participation of school board member Susan Morrison due to medical related matters. Is there a motion for such? Dr. Gupta has made the motion, seconded by Dr. Brennan. Is there any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye. 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 Those opposed, the motion carries. And we are going to make sure that school board member Morrison receives all of the handouts that are given tonight. And school board member Morrison, when you are prepared to begin engaging in conversation, the chair certainly will recognize you. At this time, let us stand now and observe our Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. School board members, tonight, Section C gives us the opportunity to approve our agenda. We want to thank our board clerk for the able way in which these matters have been featured, both to the public and to the school board, and all matters pertaining to the agenda have been communicated with us along the week. Is there a motion to approve tonight's agenda for our March the 2nd, 2021 meeting?
I would make a motion to approve the agenda for the March 2nd, 2021 meeting.
Thank you, Vice Chair Brennan, for the motion. Is there a second by Dr. Carter? Any further discussion or questions? Hearing none, all those in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed, the motion carries. And that now moves us to the next section of our agenda, And as we prepare to go to Section D, allow me to please indicate the following. From our school board norms and protocols, I am just so thankful for our full cooperation with these norms and protocols, in which we acknowledge that we will hear each opinion, but ultimately act as one. We will speak candidly and courteously to each other and listen to dissenting or different viewpoints with an open mind. We will help each other to depersonalize disagreements, and once we reach a decision or compromise as a board, we will each support the board in word and deed. And I thank you for that tonight. And as we are moving through the meeting, just to change up a little bit, I will be starting when there is time for vote or discussion on votes. I'm going to start with School Board Member Harvey and end up with School Board Member Evans. And we'll just do that from time to time as we are going through our meetings to engage everyone in that way. With that being said, we will now move to Section D of our agenda, special presentation, and I'm going to ask that Dr. Edwards would lead us in this item.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. Can you all hear me okay?
Yes.
Great. We thought it would be prudent to kind of do the return to learn first. It has been a very active couple of weeks with some changes between the governor's announcement, CDC announcement. We're still awaiting some guidance from VDH. I've received some guidance from VDOE. And with vaccinations going on and COVID numbers going down. So we really wanted to provide the community with an update on a couple different items and hopefully answer a lot of questions that family members and community members may have regarding return to learn. So Ms. Pugh and I are going to tag team, and then we're going to get Dr. Sinha to do the part that she does so well when she goes over COVID in our community, which is looking a little better than it has been. So Ms. Pugh.
Absolutely. Good evening, board.
Good evening.
I have shared with you a one-page overview of the work that we are focusing on at this time. I'd like to give you some updates on our vaccination efforts and other factors that we are considering as we're making some crucial decisions. As Dr. Edwards said, we have a lot of things that we are beginning to address, have been addressing, and continuing the conversations of providing both remote and in-person learning for our students. As she mentioned, the COVID numbers in our area are decreasing. I look at our cases in LCS for positive cases as well as quarantines. I know Dr. Edwards does the same. I look at the information that's available to us on the VDH website on a daily basis, and we monitor that very carefully. So our LCS cases and quarantine numbers have been steadily declining for the past 3 to 4 weeks, and that's great. I believe we've had between 0 and 3 cases this week on a daily basis, not total. And our quarantine numbers, while at first were sometimes 40 and 19 a day, we're down to just a handful of quarantine cases. We also look at the Lynchburg city metrics, and those are improving. And I'm not going to go over those in detail because I believe Dr. Sinha will be doing that. But while we're still in the red, it is encouraging that the number of cases per 100,000 over a 14-day period is below the number in September when we began bringing students into school from remote-only learning, where we started in August. I believe today we were around 221. The number was 221, and in September that number was 263. Also, the percentage of positive cases is coming below 10% and staying there, which is really good. Alongside that, vaccinations for our LCS employees are increasing. 70% of LCS staff to date indicated that they wanted to receive the vaccination. 661 staff members, which is about 61%, have received their first dose. 280 have received their second dose. 99% of our elementary staff, pre-K to 5 staff, have received at least 1 dose, and we anticipate that they will receive their second dose by March the 15th. The remaining 1% of our elementary staff had to be rescheduled for one reason or another. They were not able to make their initial appointment. So we are working very quickly to make sure that 100% of our staff that would like to receive the vaccination are able to do so. Recently, Dr. Edwards shared with me some information that the American Academy of Pediatrics and the Virginia chapter had shared with information with superintendents from across the Commonwealth. And in that, they noted, as we've talked about before, that schools are not super spreader sites. As well, CDC has reported that COVID transmission among students is relatively rare. Dr. Edwards also gave you a hard copy, but up on the screen there is something, a document that was also shared with the AAP, the Virginia chapter of the AAP, in terms of exposure risk based on masking and distancing. And if you will note, particularly between the 3-foot and the 6-foot distancing, if both parties are wearing a mask, the exposure risk based on that is less than 0.5% for both 3 feet and the 6 feet social distancing measure. Austin, if you could scroll down or go, I believe there's another document that looks like Swiss cheese. Dr. Edwards also shared this with you as well. This is something else that we need to keep in mind. So as we are making our plans, we are continuing to mitigate to the maximum possible and to monitor. And so we know that we need to continue to look at all of the different things that are either individual responsibilities of our staff and our students, as well as shared responsibilities, so that we are lessening the risk of exposure. Thank you, Austin. So I will move on. There are many crucial decisions that are impacting student learning across the division, and the Return to Learn 2.0 teams are currently working on plans for the following, and this is on the handout that I gave to you. So currently, right now, we are focusing on learning and providing assistance for struggling students and families. We are supporting them with division-wide efforts, also with school efforts. I want to reiterate that teaching and learning must occur during in-person instruction. We have set that expectation. In-person learning is not intended to be a time to supervise students who are using Google Classroom or Seesaw in the classroom. So we are reiterating this with our teachers, with our staff, but we are focusing right now on making sure that in-person instructional time is just that. It is crucial time for the teacher and the students to be together.
So Ms. Pugh, can you just pause there for a second so I can just touch that one a little bit more, because several parents have or caregivers have contacted us. I want the staff to understand from where this is coming. Some family members, parents, caregivers, students have contacted us, and us being board members, administrators, principals, not just myself, to share their experience in in-person learning in the hybrid setting. And in many cases, I get such great email that talks about how teachers are going above and beyond, how kids are enjoying the time that they have, even if it's 2 days a week, with their teachers, that they're grateful. And there are so many wonderful things going on, hands-on activities and learning stations. But we also hear where, on occasion, kids come to school and they're sitting and they're doing Google Classroom. And I think when this board committed to having hybrid way back in, when did we start? In September? Way back in September, one of the things that we said was the in-person learning, those 2 days are 2 precious days. Those are days that kids are looking forward to you being the teacher, the instructor, the assistant, but you, the person, not to sit and say, go on Google Classroom and finish this or do that, not to go on Seesaw and do this and do that. And for all of the staff who make that personal experience for kids wonderful, thank you, thank you, thank you, because they absolutely need that. But for some, at least as reported by families, students, parents, that this is the child's experience. We do want to reiterate that those days that the kids are in front of you is precious time, precious instructional time where they deserve the best you possible. That's when that dynamic teaching happens. And even in September, we thought, wow, once kids go home and say, you should have been there, that teaching was on fire today, it would make more kids want to come for in-person learning. So we did want to take pause because we did get some questions about that, and some questions whether or not downtown or admin or even myself are telling folks, do not teach. Right? I've been an educator for over 34 years. You will never hear me say, do not teach. Any opportunity that we have in front of kids, including this board opportunity right now, is a learning opportunity and a teaching opportunity. So let's continue to light the world on fire when we have those kids in front of us, and give them the absolute awesome teaching that they deserve. Thanks.
Thank you. We also are, schools are doing home visits. We've got teams that are going out into the community. We're planning neighborhood events. Some of the schools have already been out into their neighborhoods. Ethel Reeves and Dr. Allison Jordan and I are working with several schools right now to plan events that are coming up in the next week to get out into neighborhoods, into communities, to bring along instructional materials that are specific to students and families, to take out MiFi hotspots for families that might come that don't have them, to bring Chromebooks to swap out if a student has a broken Chromebook. So we're really working to reach out to the community and get into the neighborhoods and to make home visits. I know that Ethel Reeves is also working on making free tutoring available where the schools are identifying those needs, and we are setting up some tutoring for those students where the needs have been identified. As I mentioned last time, we also have students from some surrounding universities and colleges that they're getting their practicum hours by supporting our students doing some virtual tutoring. So those are some things that we are focusing on right now. We have a group that's also focusing on fourth quarter and how that might look differently for some of our students. So this group is focusing on increasing the number of in-person learning days for students in grades pre-K to 2 at a date to be determined. We're looking at the things that we do know from this team that's working. We are looking at 4 days a week of in-person learning for these students. We understand that 6 feet social distancing is the best, but 3 feet social distancing is also acceptable. And so for us to be able to get students in 4 days a week, we're going to have to look at decreasing the social distancing in the classroom. We will also have to look at the number of students that are increased on a bus, and we are surveying our families, reaching out to our families in pre-K to 2 to ask them, is there an absolute need for your child to ride the bus? And if not, if you're able to bring them to school, to transport them to school, please allow that to happen so that the students who absolutely need a space have that space on the bus. We will continue to use our health mitigation protocol, our face masks, our hand washing, those types of things that we have in place. Our students and our staff will still be temperature screened when they come into the building. A fully remote option will still remain available for those families who want it. I do want to say this, and let me be clear. So if you are watching, if you are listening, let me be clear. Yes, quarter 4 starts on March 24th, but I did not say students will be coming in 4 days a week beginning on March 24th. The team that's working on this is finalizing the details. We need to give them just a little bit more time to work out some of those things, and we will communicate with our staff and our families this week on the date for that to start. So let me say that again. I did not say that students in pre-K to 2 are coming in 4 days a week, starting on March the 24th. The start date will be communicated with our staff and with our families this week.
So let me jump in there again, just to kind of add a little overlay for that. What Ms. Pugh is talking about, these teams that are starting up, they're just in planning phase. And for many of our teachers, while they know that we have a fourth quarter plan, we haven't collected information from them. We haven't surveyed them. We haven't gone back to them to look at their current rooms, which are set up as in 6 feet, to see what their maximum capacity could be if we reduce to a 3 feet between children. We haven't surveyed our families to see which families want to remain remote, which families want to continue using bus services, which families can transport their kids. So there is a lot of work that has to be done behind the scenes. And I think sometimes community and folks who aren't in the trenches don't understand that some of that work has to be done. So let me take you back into fall, September, when we were busily, and remember our plan, we started with pre-K to 2 in the fall, when we were bringing kids back after being completely remote on August 24th. And I remember us changing bus schedules. I remember principals calling families the night before. I remember families calling me saying, yesterday I was in Cohort A, now I'm in Cohort B. Why can't you all get it together? And we want to learn from some of that by not trying to rush and put this together. It may require some tweaks and some changes that we don't know yet until we get into the details of it. So as Ms. Pugh said, even though the fourth marking period is right around the corner, we do want to be mindful and give our bus drivers, our teachers, our administrative staff, our principals enough time, and our families enough time so that when they do get the information, it's information they can rely on and plan by, and not have some of the things that occurred in the fall where they made plans and had to change plans due to just some changes we had to make.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
We also have a group that's focusing on what next fall will look like. So what does school look like for the 21-22 school year? There's a group that's focusing on in-person learning. If you've noted in the news, Virginia legislator passed this week. It needs to be signed by the governor, but a bill that would require school divisions to offer in-person learning 5 days a week. We also, this year, currently during the pandemic, received a waiver for a 180-day, 990-hour requirement. We will not receive that same waiver in the 21-22 school year. So with that, and in their planning, we are using and following the adopted 2021-22 calendars that the board adopted in a 2-year cycle about 18 months ago for both LCS and Bass Elementary. And both of those calendars, for those that are listening, those families that are listening, both of those calendars are already linked on our LCS website. So if you go to the home page, there's a green button that says calendars, and if you click on that, you can find the calendars for Bass Elementary as well as the other schools. So the things that we do know right now, and again, as Dr. Edwards just said, these teams are still planning, and so there are details that have not been worked out. We want to make sure that we get it right and that we have all of the details. So we do know 5 days a week, in-person learning for all students will be the default option. We will have dedicated staff for in-person learning and a separate staff for remote or virtual learning. So this year, as you know, we've had, especially at the secondary level and even the elementary level, some staff are doing both hybrid and remote only. And so we want to make sure that our staff are focusing on the students that are in front of them, and then another staff set that is focusing on the virtual or remote option. Again, I mentioned the 6 feet social distancing, but we may have to consider a 3 feet social distancing as we bring more students in 5 days a week. Again, we'll have to look at increased numbers of students on the bus, and we will be very purposeful in surveying our families and asking them if they have an absolute need to ride the bus to please select that, but if they're able to provide transportation, that will help us get more students on the buses if families are able to bring their students. Of course, again, we will continue our health mitigation protocol. We're, again, looking at continuing staff and student temperature screening prior to coming into the building, face masks, hand washing, all of the things that we are doing now. So there are still some details to be worked out in terms of bus routes and daily schedules and what that will look like and staff, but these are the things that we know right now.
Okay. And you skipped summer, so I'm just going to ask you to back.
I am so sorry. I went from, you are so sorry. I will go back. I didn't mean to skip summer because that is very important. So we also have a group that are focusing on what summer opportunities will look like for all of our students. So they're in the planning stages again of looking at what offerings and opportunities we will have. We know at this point we will have both full and half-day opportunities for students. We will have in-person and for all of our students, and we will have some online courses at the high school level that we have offered in the past. These opportunities will be based on academic needs of the students. They may include, as it says here, but not be limited to those students that we might have concerns about in terms of retention, but we want to provide intervention instead. We're working to fill the gaps for students, skill building, and next level preparation. We will have opportunities for all students. We know we have students, as we've said, that are struggling and making D's and F's, and perhaps they were struggling before the pandemic. We want to provide opportunities for them. We also want to provide opportunities for those students who were A-B students and now may be struggling with C's or B's and C's and some D's. So we will have remediation, intervention, gap filling, skill building, enrichment, lots of different opportunities. And they are, again, putting the finishing details on those so that we hopefully will be able to let our families know by the end of March what those specific opportunities are so they can begin to plan. We will be purposeful about identifying students by need, and schools will reach out to those families to strongly suggest and encourage them to participate in these opportunities for their students. Okay. And I apologize for skipping over summer because that's really important.
That's okay. So thank you for sharing the update. And let me just say, a lot of our staff often watch the board meeting and they'll say, Dr. Edwards, why do I learn everything that's going on in my building from the board meeting? And that is something that we absolutely do not want to do. So what Ms. Pugh is talking about in terms of teams, those are teams that are administrators and school personnel that are working together who are absolutely going to go back to staff and talk with staff and get staff input about what's working, what's been successful, what do we need to continue doing, as well as families. So while tonight we're giving you an overview, and I'm sure if you're like me, you probably have lots of questions about every single detail, we don't have every single detail. And the reason why we wanted to put it out there is many families have contacted us and said, listen, I want to make plans for the summer. I need to know where you're going. I need to know what the fall is going to look like. So we're giving you tonight as much information as we have. And to my staff, if this is the first time that you're hearing this, I apologize. I hope it's not the first time that you're hearing this, but you will have many more details regarding what these programs look like. Ethel Reeves and her communication team is also working with us and to the press. We will be doing a press release, I think, later this week to talk a little bit more detail and answer questions to the degree that we can. But a lot of work is happening this week with the staff in terms of just the sharing from the teams.
Absolutely.
And I'm sure there are questions, and I think we're done giving the quick overview.
Two more things quick.
Go ahead.
Virtual Academy. So there is another group that's focusing on a fully virtual instructional option for the fall. And again, as I mentioned, there will be a dedicated staff for that. There will be synchronous and asynchronous learning, which will be required for those students that are participating. There will be increased accountability for student participation in virtual instruction in terms of participating there. And then we're hoping this will be an option for our homeschooled students to rejoin LCS. So there's a team that's focusing on that, and then one team that's focusing on, as we discussed in some of our budget meetings previously, a pilot class for pre-K classroom at Hutcherson Early Learning Center for 3-year-olds. And I would just ask board members, if you get questions that are not on this sheet that you're not able to answer, please redirect any questions from constituents to me, and then I can get them the detailed information. My email is on that one-page handout that I gave to you. So that is the update for Return to Learn. It was lengthy, and I appreciate your patience as we went through that. But I think it's important for you to know what we're working on, as well as for our families to have a brief overview.
Thank you so much, Deputy Superintendent Pugh, and it needed to be the length that you have so ably presented tonight. And I know that there are several board members who have some solid substantive statements to make and questions, and so we're going to open the floor for that to happen at this time, that we could do it as clearly and with concise and coherent thoughts. And if I could, I'll start with School Board Member Harvey, and we'll just go around in that way.
Okay, just a point of order is that will we be able to ask second questions or follow-up?
Oh, absolutely, you can.
We present all questions at this time.
You certainly can have opportunity to come back. This is for discussion tonight, but of course, that's where we are.
Okay. All right. So one of the questions I just wanted to ask you, can you revisit the numbers regarding vaccination, specifically the total number of staff who are being vaccinated? I understand we have a high percentage of those who wish to be vaccinated. What I'd like to know is what is the percentage of our staff that we should anticipate have been vaccinated at the conclusion of our efforts?
So we have 1,576 staff members in LCS. 1,079 indicated they wanted to receive the vaccination, so that's about 70%. Of those 1,079, 661 have received the first dose, which is roughly 61% of that. Of those, 280 have received the second dose. 99% of our elementary staff have received at least one dose.
Okay, and I know Ms. Brown is actively working very hard to be able to vaccinate all of our staff. Generally, do we know how long, what that timeline will be?
Yes, and Director Brown, I believe, is listening, so if she would like to jump in, she can, but we are anticipating and hoping that the remainder of our staff will be vaccinated their first dose in the next 2 weeks.
Yes, that's correct. So we're running a clinic on Monday. And so we should take care of half of those vaccinations, if not more than half. And then we'll run another clinic, which should take care of the remaining staff that would like to be vaccinated, and anyone else that has changed their answer to yes on the survey.
Thank you.
Pending the availability of vaccines.
vaccinations.
So just, I have to say that because sometimes we're promised a certain amount of doses and that changes, so.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and you certainly will be able to ask further questions of Mr. Harvey. Dr. Gupta.
Thank you, Ms. Pugh, for all your hard work in presenting this report, and I apologize if I have missed it. What is the reason for not opening up beyond pre-K to 2 for 4 days a week? I know vaccination is one. Are there other reasons why we are not opening beyond pre-K and 2?
Yeah, if you don't mind, I can kind of take that. In talking with the buildings, again, we're not sure how we may have to reassign existing staff in the building because we're not hiring any new folks to come in and work in the building. We are hopeful that further into the fourth marking period, the weather cooperates so we can use some outdoor spaces, which means that we may have to have, someone in the classroom, somebody in a small group outside of the classroom. So in order to really facilitate that, we've asked the principals to kind of look at their staff and work together. The other thing is we're following the same protocols that we followed in the fall, where we start with our most vulnerable learners, and we which was the pre-K to 2 group, some students with disabilities as well as ELL students first to see. And I'm up here slightly nervous because one of the things that is in here, and you do have the CDC guidance, and the CDC guidance does say that 6 feet is what you should strive for, although 3 feet, the CDC doesn't say 3 feet, but in conversation with medical professionals, AAP, the Virginia chapter, 3 feet is acceptable. So we're moving in from our 6 feet to a 3 feet, and in a similar fashion as we did in the fall, we're going to continue to monitor our COVID data. We're going to continue to make sure that as many staff who wanted to get vaccinated are vaccinated with that.
Because, can I follow up?
Please.
I have a couple of concerns, because 400 of your staff have said they don't want to be vaccinated. So we'll never be in a position to open schools if you're relying on just vaccination of the staff. So what is the contingency plan in that case?
I am not relying on the vaccination for the staff. I am just waiting the time for the staff who actually said they wanted to get vaccinated. We are opening up 4 days a week with all of the staff who will have second doses and all of the staff who chose not to receive the vaccine. It's not mandatory that staff receive it, and we're going to respect their decision, but we're not letting that decision guide us. If you look at what we have planned for the fall, it's 5 days a week. It's not dependent on whether or not staff are vaccinated or not.
Because personally, I like to see, even if you're going online, have it synchronous. What is stopping a teacher to come on Zoom 8 o'clock in the morning and go class by class in Zoom face-to-face instruction? Some districts in Virginia are doing that. So this asynchronous mode leaves it to the students whether they want to attend or not, and we can see in our grades what's happening. So at least if you're not going beyond pre-K and 2, could we go into that synchronous mode for online instruction starting March 24th?
As far as making synchronous mandatory for every student, is that what you're suggesting? And we still do have some families that don't have access during the day. That may be because they're just not here. They're staying with another family member due to family situations. And I think in conversations with families, I've heard, make it mandatory. If kids don't show up, give them zeros if the work is late and things like that. And I'm going to be quite honest, we are struggling with what is the right thing to do that works for every family. And certainly for some families, and I have 5 kids, for some families, if you said there's mandatory Zoom 9 o'clock every day, that's enough to motivate certain kids to be like, oh, I can't miss it because it's mandatory. And for other families who may be struggling, if a parent has lost their job and they're traveling and the kids are in places where there isn't supervision for them to Zoom, that's a struggle for them. So we, as educators, originally when we were trying to put this plan together, we were looking for flexibility in terms of when things are due and how much time kids had for assignments. We heard from families that said, my kids can only get this done on the weekend, so can you stop making things mandatory on Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday? And we're like, okay, we want to be family friendly and we want to be flexible. We do recognize we're in the middle of a pandemic. We also have to, and there's a lot of research out there about stress and just for the kids, the social emotional stress. And I would be remiss if I didn't say for the adults, there's that too. And I do know divisions that have been remote the entire time. And when you're remote the entire time, you're only planning for remote. And you can do that synchronous because that is your plan. But I want you to consider our staff who are in person with kids in front of them 2 days a week. And then the other 2 days a week, they have a different set of kids in front of them. And all of our classrooms, we do have some pilots that are set up, but all of our classrooms are not set up so that we have a swivel or something that follows the teacher. So if I'm Zooming, and I need to see you, I'm either carrying my laptop while I'm talking to this class here, I'm walking around the room, or you're unattended while I'm over here helping, and then you might not be able to hear me as I have to get back over. So it is a little challenging and a little different. I'm not saying it cannot be done. I'm saying when I consider the feedback from families, students, and staff who say this is sometimes challenging to do, it weighs in. And never mind the fact that we also have staff who are not only doing the hybrid and checking up on the 2 days a week, they're also the remote learning teachers. So that free time that they have first thing in the morning is, first, let me check on all my kids who don't come to school at all, and I have to get back and forth to them. So I say that to say that I don't think that any of it is ideal and works completely for every single student. I do understand parents' frustration with wanting teachers to have a full day of a class or a day of kids sitting in front of computers.
The other frustration parents have is this pandemic will have almost an anniversary in a week or two. March 13th or 15th, when the governor declared every school is going offline. So we had plenty of time to plan the mitigation strategies for the challenges and learn from as we went. So by this time now, I'm assuming we should have a thorough understanding of what it takes to go where we are going.
I would say yes and no, because as we were planning things, and if you just think back to what we thought in the fall, and some of the decisions that we made in the fall, and even the CDC, if we just follow their history and look at how some of the things have changed and what they said we should do in the beginning, and then it changed. So I don't think that we can say on March 13th last year, these were the conditions that you received everything you needed to know to safely educate kids at that point, and nothing changed. So why aren't you in a better place right now? Things have changed. We're even at the point now where they're saying double mask might be a more effective. We have a new variant, which is a different strain that we're examining. So while we've been in this pandemic, it has been a challenge for folks to respond. It has been a challenge to manage transportation in a division that already had a bus driver shortage prior to the pandemic. So there were some things that, it has been difficult. I will say, though, I'm going to say kudos to Lynchburg City Schools, because in just sitting on some of the conversations and listening to where the governor was when he was making a statement about, kids need some learning by March 15th, we made that decision early. We made a decision early that every child, not just elementary school, and I know I've received criticism like, oh, but this division, they have their elementary school going 5 days a week, but their high school's not going at all. And that part's not being said. Or these kids are in and they're receiving that, but their art and their music and their PE and all of their cultural arts and resource teachers are now teaching math and reading, and kids aren't getting the arts. Our kids are getting the arts. In some cases, students in high school show up they go to school, but it's modified study hall. They can find their teachers, they can ask questions in other divisions, and we don't have that. So sometimes I think if you look at the details of what other divisions are doing, and you actually dig a little deeper, you'll see all of the wonderful things that they are. My colleagues have done some amazing things, but so have we in Lynchburg City Schools. We really have done some amazing things with our kids and our families, and I'm going to stand by that and stand by my staff. Have we gotten it right every single time? Absolutely not, but I don't know anybody who has in the middle of this pandemic. What I can tell you is that every day we come to work, each and every day, with the best intentions at heart to do the best that we can for kids.
Thank you so much, Dr. Edwards. Thank you, Mr. Harvey and Dr. Gupta, Dr. Sinha.
Just a quick comment, sort of tied to what you were saying, was asked, Liberty University turned on a dime and went fully remote. Why can't the schools? Well, they have an enrollment of 125,000 students, 100,000 of which were fully remote anyway. And LU's been in the distance education business since the early 70s. So that's not an apt comparison. Just want to make that point. And it is a very difficult transition to make to fully remote or even hybrid remote when you're accustomed to in the classroom all the time. One question, have you considered, I know why we do the K through 2, they're our youngest learners, they're probably least able to benefit from remote learning, and of course our at-risk students, but are you including in that list of at-risk students any student who has shown a real collapse? You know, because we've heard anecdotally of high achievers who were doing well when they were in person, who now that it's gone to remote have just seen a total collapse in their performance for one reason or another, of prioritizing getting them back regardless of grade for some additional enrichment, or I don't know what that would be or how it would look, but I would like to see us try to make that a priority before the year's out.
We've actually been doing that all year long, and as to how it looks, it just looks like everything. I will tell you that. For our seniors, because we're concerned about seniors who are, you know, whether or not they're on track to graduate. Some of them are coming in 4 days a week. Some of them are coming in 2 days a week, and then on the 2 days that they're not here, they absolutely have a person who is assigned to them to help them through the struggles because they have difficulty staying motivated or have difficulty doing their work. We have that with some of our youngest learners as well. Where principals and guidance counselors, school counselors, and teachers have been amazing at reaching out to families, and I can't tell you how many times I've heard someone say, if you can just get him or her here, if you can get them here, we can do so-and-so. And I do want to shout out to our transportation department, and yes, we do have a bus driver shortage, but the people who are working in the transportation department have been phenomenal. And if you ride with them and actually see where they're going, and I know our buses look like they don't make any sense whatsoever. Why is one zigzagging all over the place? Sometimes it's just, that's the only bus that can get that kid who goes to that school because that's not their home school, but that's the only bus that can get them. So they have to go over there and pick them up, and they will. They have been doing that. They have been making room for, I mean, we have some hard deadlines. You have to, you know, have your hybrid if you want in by here. But as families have been calling us saying, you know, in the beginning of the year, the work was easy and this was okay, and now my child is struggling, principals and teachers and school counselors and assistants and everybody have been working with them to get them moving. And I think Amy talked a lot about the summer, and one thing that's on your sheet, and we are really pressing that the word is not retention, it's intervention. We are not looking at, during a pandemic, trying to hold back a group of kids. We are looking to do everything that we can now, everything that we can in the neighborhoods as we go to the neighborhoods, everything that we can do during the summer, everything that we can do at the beginning of the fall next year to make sure that kids are prepared to move to the next level.
Thank you. It's really good to know. That's like one of those things that, or maybe it's just me not paying as close attention, that doesn't get highlighted, is that, you know, going above and beyond and reaching out to these students who are struggling to give them the extra attention they obviously need. So thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. Dr. Nilles?
Yeah, it's clear there's an awful lot of work and a whole lot of moving pieces. I guess a couple concerns are, I think it sounds like we're trying to be everything to everybody, and I don't think that's possible. I think our priority ought to be is try to get as many kids back in to school at least 4 days a week as possible. I acknowledge that everybody needs to recognize that the CDC guidance and the official guidance doesn't support that. And, you know, we're a we're not a private school. You know, we can't make up our own rules. That's the reality of it. But in that regards, and I understand the need to survey teachers and parents about their plans and wants and what they'd like to see. The surveys, are they going out this week? You know, what's the deadline for returning the surveys? When would you expect to have enough data or information to make and support a decision? And along that line, it's what's going to be the driver between 6-foot versus 3-foot spacing? You know, again, the CDC guidance doesn't support that, understandably, but you know, there's been a lot, there are a lot of companies that people have been working the whole time through this pandemic, and I think particularly in light of the vaccination availability and the incidences are going down, that, you know, we need to be willing to reduce the spacing requirements, because it's a pretty artificial constraint, I think.
I can address the survey.
Okay.
The team that is focusing on the most pressing need, which would be quarter 4, I met with them today, and we discussed doing a survey. And one of the drawbacks of doing a survey is that we often don't get a lot of responses. And so in the middle of the year, rather than doing a survey, we asked some of our schools to have teachers reach out and make phone calls. So that team had the conversation today about reaching out to families and asking questions about their intent and some of the plans that we're doing for getting our youngest students back in 4 days a week at some point during the 4th quarter. So I believe their movement forward is to make phone calls, personal phone calls, to reach out to individual families so that we have that information versus relying on a survey. That will happen. A communication will go out to our pre-K2 families tomorrow. I can say that, and to our staff as well. And then they will begin making those phone calls to gather that information in the next week.
And then with regard to the 6 feet, 3 feet, again, and thank you for saying we are not a private school. And if you remember way back in the beginning, we got our guidance from VDOE. We had the 3R book. We had a mitigation plan. We have to work with the health department. The health department has to bless our plan. So there are a lot of other considerations in terms of us going forward. We, Lynchburg City Schools, in the middle of double-digit red everywhere in the community, were able to move forward and keep our schools open because we took a stand and said, in addition to the metrics that at that point, the VDH was saying, look at the community spread, we decided to take our own metrics and look at LCS spread. And I think I did that video in December and said, this is what we're gonna do. We're gonna consider the community, and the community was red hot. But within Lynchburg City Schools, our staff, our students were practicing good mitigation. We proved it worked, so we were able to keep schools open against the odds. And there were other health departments and other places in the Commonwealth where if they had the numbers we had, those places were still remote only. We were not, but I thank our health department for having some trust in us as Lynchburg City Schools and how we do it. Here we go again, going against the grain a little bit with the CDC saying, if at all possible, stay at 6 feet. You can shrink it, but you're going to need to prove that within your, as you said, Mike, businesses have been doing this. We have not done this. Lynchburg City Schools has not done this. We have not reduced our outside of the bus, we have one child per seat on the bus, but we don't have classrooms right now where I could say, yes, these classrooms are already at 3 feet, and therefore I know it already works in Lynchburg City Schools. So I think we have to take that first step to move in that direction. So when you say, what's the difference between the 3 and the 6, I don't think it's as much that as it is us as a Lynchburg City community still looking at our numbers and moving at a very methodical pace that we moved when we did this in the fall.
Okay, I guess it's more of a comment, follow-up, that if what it takes to get the kids back in school at least 4 days a week is it's a focus on academics, and that the arts are going to have to be a second priority, then I think that's what we should do. There's too many kids that are struggling grade-wise, academic-wise, and that's what, and I'm a supporter of the arts, I'm a supporter of sports, and you know, those kids involved in that, they can engage after school to the best of the extent of their ability. I don't think that should be prohibited from participating at all, but I think what goes on in the schools should be, if that's what it takes to get these kids back, is a focus on academics for the rest of the year. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Nilles. Dr. Brennan?
Thank you, Dr. Coleman, and thank you, Ms. Pugh, for that thorough presentation and making it clear to the community where we're headed, which is clearly in the right direction. And I'd like to thank you and Dr. Edwards and the staff and the teachers and everyone who has worked so hard for these many months in this very difficult time to provide education to our students. They've done such a great job. And I think looking back on March 13th, when the schools were closed, we thought only for 2 weeks things have changed a lot in that period of time. And I think Lynchburg City Schools has really been a model to other school districts about how it can be done the right way. And I think you all deserve a lot of credit for doing that. And I know that our community and students really appreciate it. Having said that, I think we all know, the board, the administration, the staff, the families know that we're not doing as well as we want to do, and that's really a national phenomenon. It's just locally, but this is a very difficult situation to go from in-person full-time learning to remote and virtual. And we know in our own setting, and we know nationally, that 20% of students may be not engaged at all as far as technology or schools, and that's not just us, but that's a national phenomenon. We know that the grades have been worse. We know that at least there's an impression that there are some students in our high schools that are not being challenged as much as we think they should be. I mean, there are a lot of issues we need to address. And we also need to address the fact that there's such an important social emotional impact on this and all the students. Dr. Gupta back in the fall went to City Council with a report from the McKinsey Group that talked about what damage this would be to the vulnerable population, and they've updated that report emphasizing how bad this will be for the vulnerable students. And to quote from that, they say, now, while all students are suffering, those who come into the pandemic with the fewest academic opportunities are on track to exit with the greatest learning loss. And it's unfortunate, but we know we're facing that, and we're going to address that to fix it in the ways you've pointed out. But I also want to point out that we do know a lot more now than we did back in March and in the spring and in the fall. As has been pointed out, we know that the number of cases in our area have dropped dramatically, and by percent positive, by the population per 100,000, we are clearly in a much better place than we were before. There is information from the CDC looking at schools in Wisconsin and North Carolina and other places that show that the risk of transmission from staff to students or their way is very unusual, and in fact, transmission from a student to a staff is almost a reportable event, as you mentioned. It's very unusual for that to happen. There are other public schools that we also know that have stayed open 100% in other parts of the country. We know that private schools in the country and locally have stayed open and have been able to continue to teach. So we know there is an example out there that this can work for us to reopen the schools. And although the recommended distance is 6 feet, I know that we all are understanding now that that is the maximum amount, and that we all agree that with mitigation plans in place, such as masking and hygiene, we can do less than that, and we probably should do less than that in order to reopen the schools. And then lastly, as far as positive things, the vaccination program is making a big difference, and many thanks to Ms. Brown and her team for performing this phenomenal job with our staff. But vaccination is not a requirement to reopen the schools. That's CDC recommendations, that's national recommendations. We don't need to have that. It's a great piece to have, but we don't need to have it. So in light of that, as someone who's not an educator by any means, but is an individual board member and is the guardian of 2 children who are on our high school system, I have 3 requests to the Return to Learn group to consider while they're still in the planning phase. The first is that I would like them to consider opening the schools beyond K through 2 through K through 5. We know that 10-year-olds and less are less likely to be infected. We know that they are suffering the most, or one of the groups suffering the most from not being back in school, to open the elementary schools, to look at what are the hurdles, which Dr. Edwards has pointed some of those out, but we also know we are in a different setting now as far as everyone's not going to come back to school. There will be room in the schools, and we have resources to handle some of the hurdles we've had before through the CARES funding. So I really would like that group to look at, can we not just open K through 2, but K through 5. The other part that Dr. Gupta brought up is the idea of synchronous and asynchronous teaching, and I know that we have followed that model, but can that group look at that in an objective way to say what are the advantages and what are the disadvantages, and which one is the right one for us now? As one of our board members said many months ago, can we be flexible enough to change if we need to change? Clearly, there are a number of students who need to have a scheduled day, to need to be able to say, I'm going to have a class at this time and I'm going to participate in that class. And then lastly, we received a memo last week from the Virginia Department of Education about their LEARNS initiative, which is their statewide program to look at what the state should do to improve public school teaching for the spring, for the summer, and for the fall. And they're asking families to make public comments related to that. I hope we will do a survey in addition to doing phone calls. I hope that I would ask that we do some type of a format that the community can feed back to us to let us know how it is going for their families. We did that on the original Return to Learn schedule where we had Zoom sessions or Facebook or some way that people could come and comment. But I think we need to get the feedback from the community. And although not everyone will fill out the survey, maybe some will do that, some will answer the phone, some will participate in a format, but I think we really need to hear from the community, just as the state is asking families to respond to that. So those are the 3 requests I have, and they're based on the fact that I think that we have been a model for our state for the past number of months as far as what we've done successfully. I'd like us to continue to be a model for us for the coming phase of this. I'd like us to be flexible enough to change if we need to change. And as Dr. Edwards just said, I'd like to take her words and say, I'd love to see us light up our students on fire again. But thank you for listening to my comments.
Absolutely, thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Dr. Carter.
Yes, I want to say that I really am proud of our efforts that we've done to make sure that we're looking at both of our customers, the students and also the teachers and the other staff of the Lynchburg City Schools. And as Dr. Senna stated, I think we need to brag about some of the things that we're doing about going above and beyond. You get the impression that we're not providing any type of remediation or teaching or anything extra for the older students other than just the 2 days of in-person learning or the hybrid learning, and that's not the case. I see that we are reaching out and we are going above and trying to make sure that we're reaching every student that's calling and asking, and even the ones that we see and they're able to address. And also just proud of how that we have adapted and adjusted and amended the plan to address all of the guidance that's changed and some that was kind of conflicting regarding the CDC and from the CDC and the VDH. And also just really pleased that our focus is not on retention, but it's on being proactive, and is on not on retention, but the focus is on intervention. And I'm very happy with that. So for the, today we had a religious exemption, 7 students. Are those students, if the parents are willing, can be a part of the remote academy? Is that something that is possible with this? Okay.
Yes.
So. Oh, and just that there's no one will be satisfied. And this is a tough situation, and I really just see that the plan has always been methodical, and we're really trying to take in every side. And different factors in our communities are afraid for the in-person. Some don't like the virtual, but we're doing what we can to move the needle and to continue to stay abreast and to reach our students. And thank you for all of the teachers and administrators and everyone that's really out there just making it work and also for the fact that they really want to do all they can to get more students into schools. And I'm just confident that you all will do that.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. School Board Member Susan Morrison. No, ma'am. Try again, Susan.
Dr. Coleman, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Loud and clear.
Is it too loud? I'm sorry.
No, you're good. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I do agree with most of the comments that my colleagues have made. We do need and want our students back in school as soon as we can get them back. I do like the idea that Dr. Brennan and Dr. Nillis and others have said about getting pre-K through 5 back as soon as possible, particularly 5th graders who will be moving on to 6th grade, the middle school years next year. I do think there's a very important point that Dr. Edwards made earlier tonight, and I want to reiterate that. The key to in-person instructional time should just be that, personal instructional time. And that's important for our students to be successful. It's important for our students to be engaged with their teachers, and I do think we have many teachers out there who are doing just that. I also am concerned about the stress of the emotional, mental, social issues that our students will face when they come back and how that will be part of the plan for them returning to school. I do respect my colleague, Dr. Nillis, but I do not agree that the arts should be eliminated. I think just like athletics, that's a connection to a school and to a program that's really important to a lot of students. And I hope that we continue to add that to our curriculum as we return students. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morton. Ms. Evans?
Thank you. I totally agree and would love to see a push for K through 5, not just K through 2. I think it's very important to get all elementary in 4 days a week. I really want to touch very quickly on what you said with the high school learners and some parents and Dr. Gupta talking about having teachers teach at a certain time. And I have a student in high school. I would love for him to have class at 9, at 10 with a certain teacher. But these teachers are teaching students, one group 2 days a week, another group 2 days a week, and virtual students. I don't think it's even possible to then ask them to somehow have a set schedule for being on the computer every day. It just doesn't work. I think looking at it for next year, if we have students that do that, is the way to go. I don't think now is the time to try to change that. And I think people forget you have the option of Zooming in every day to your class. It's not a requirement, but you can, a high school student can Zoom in to a class every day if they're not there. So that option is there for students. And I just think right now, at the last 9 weeks of school, we can't say to teachers, teach in person, teach virtual, and figure out how to do some synchronous classes while you're at it. I'm not sure it's effective use of anyone's time to try to figure that out right now. To look at it for the fall, I think is a great idea. But I think our priority has to be getting everyone back in the buildings and back in school. And I'm a huge supporter of K through 5 as well.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Evans, for your comments. Is there any board member that would like to, we wanted to give everyone an opportunity to speak, and we have, and we know this is an important issue. Is there anyone who has any additional question or statement that would be substantive to the matter? Mr. Harvey.
Thank you.
And then Dr. Nillis.
Ms. Pugh, again, you're doing a Herculean effort, you and the rest of the staff. I'm just, every single day I see things that are happening, and I'm just so impressed. One of the questions that I had, and I've kind of had this noted for some time, and I think we've even shared with Dr. Edwards, this idea of encouraging our families to take advantage of some of these opportunities. You know, I keep hearing us say the word intervention. Well, when I think of intervention, I think of us being proactive in that. So I would like, and I apologize to be putting you on the spot here with this, but I would like to understand, what does that mean? How do we meet these students who are in that 20% that have not been as active? And I use that number. I think that's a number that Dr. Brennan used. But how do we reach those students? What is their intentional plan to reach those students, specifically going into the summer, to take advantage of these opportunities that we're providing? Because one of the things that I think that we're going to have to really address as we're seeking to, I mean, we always talk about the achievement gap, and we know that this pandemic has caused a further lag for many of our students. But if we're not careful, when those students do come back full-time, they could then create a lag on other students as well when we're all back in the classroom. So I just would like to get an understanding of what that intervention plan is and how we're focusing on getting families to take advantage of that. Absolutely.
I will answer the question, but then I'm also going to ask Dr. Jordan to jump in because she has additional information probably. Dr. Jordan and I have been working with building principals for the past month plus in terms of identifying those students that they are concerned about, those students that are at risk of, in the past, perhaps being retained or not passing a course at the middle school, high school level. For those elementary students, those that may be, that they are looking at for retention. As Dr. Edwards said, we are not, during a pandemic is not the time to retain students. There's research that says that is harmful for students, even not in a pandemic. So we're really focusing on what we can do ahead of time. We have asked them to identify those students. We have had multiple conversations with each of them. As a matter of fact, Dr. Jordan and I spent 2 hours talking with 2 individual principals today about the things that they are already doing for those students that are on the list in terms of bringing them in on Mondays for in-school support, bringing them in perhaps on a Friday or a Thursday or their off cohort day, assigning practicum students from a university to tutor them virtually if they're fully remote. They are also then looking at those students and identifying those that are in most critical need in terms of the intervention, and especially at the elementary level, but even secondary level, of those students that are a year, 18 months, 2 years behind, and being very purposeful about the summer opportunities that will be available and offered to those students. So those are just a few of the things that we're doing. We're also going out into communities. We're going out into the DESI community on Monday to reach out to them, as I mentioned, taking instructional kits that are specific to individual students that haven't been in school, hoping that we might see them in that community event, and or knocking on the door and offering them some support there. So we're doing lots of different things, but being very intentional about the students that we are targeting.
Okay, so is that a localized school effort?
Both, a division effort as well as a localized school effort. So there are lots of things that are happening at the school level that don't require the support of division staff. So principals and teachers and school counselors and social workers have been busy all year long already reaching out to and providing interventions and support for those students that are struggling. But in terms of summer opportunities, we're being very purposeful about providing, number one, varied opportunities for all of our students. So it's not just focusing on those that are perhaps 1 to 2 years behind, but also students that have maybe just slipped from A's and B's to now C's. So we're being very targeted in looking at those students and providing opportunities, and then specifically reaching out to families to say, This is the opportunity your student needs to participate, or maybe in jeopardy of falling further behind and not succeeding next year.
And I would add to that, Mr. Harvey, part of what, at least in my conversation with principals, relationships. You know, as a division, we can put together a program, we can make it look beautiful, we can advertise it and communicate it, but without teachers and counselors and assistants and bus drivers and nurses and everybody who has that direct connection with the kids and families, many things could just fail just for lack of relationships. And some of the most successful and also sad stories that I've heard have been around relationships. I've heard stories of teachers who are they go to drive-thrus, not because they're hungry, because that's where the students are, and they know when they roll up in that drive-thru, they'll be able to give them, here, this is what you need, this is what you missed, this is my opportunity, and don't forget to do this. But it's at least showing the kids, too, that they care about them. Families, I had a conversation with just Ms. Reeves, who said, you know, sometimes teachers will reach out and say, I'm not the person. Who's the person? We need the person who can connect with that family. And it really is understanding their situation. We have kids who are working because their parents are not. And I don't know what that feels like to be 15, 16 years old and have to be the breadwinner now in a family, and also navigate the new schooling. But there is something to be said for a very caring adult, a caring individual on the other side, having that conversation with kids. I know kids who are just saying, look, I'm working this many hours a week. I'm tired and sleepy. I cannot even get the work done. It's not failure by choice. It's just some of the situations. So I do think when Ms. Pugh said it's both school, localized school, and division, it has to be both. It can't succeed without the connections that the school staff have with students and families.
Thank you. Mr. Harvey raised a very direct question. And Ms. Pugh, I'm very impressed with your response. I think it was very detailed, wasn't avoiding anything. Dr. Edwards, you've weighed in. If Dr. Jordan has anything to add beyond what has already been stated, we certainly would like to give her an opportunity to do so.
You all hear me?
Yes.
Hello. Good evening. The only thing I would add would be that at this point, most of the employees at the school have done everything they possibly can to reach students. So we're using notes and information from Connect teams who started as early as August and September. So we're just continuing the efforts at the division level, but we have talked with principals over the last few days about specific needs of specific students, and not in an intimidating way at all. But if we can't get students in the buildings right now, we will meet students where they are in the communities. We will go out to families. We'll do whatever it takes. And this would be the message that I would give parents. Do not be embarrassed. Do not feel like we are coming out in judgment. I'm a parent who's navigating this right now. It is unreal what we are facing. So we're in this together, and we are not coming with any judgment. We want to help your students. We don't want to retain across the board, but we absolutely cannot have students in Lynchburg City Schools that do not have access to things that are going to help them become great adults, great employees, great higher ed students. We owe students the priority standards. So we're not coming in judgment. We're coming in support.
Thank you, Dr. Jordan. If Dr. Gupta, if you would, the chair would recognize Dr. Nillis, and then we'll come straight to you.
Yeah, excuse me. I was remiss earlier in not acknowledging the efforts of our staff, teaching staff, transportation staff, administrative staff, during this pandemic. Everyone has been flexible. The requirements and expectations for in-school, hybrid, in-person, Zoom lessons change frequently and regularly. The staff are really putting a lot of effort, going above and beyond to try to meet the needs of students. And I want to, they also have their own COVID situations that they're dealing with. So I just want to, and this is all being done in the public, of course. I just want to say personally, offer my thanks to everybody. And thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Millis. Dr. Gupta.
It's a difficult situation. I have teacher friends who are of my age group were scared to go back to classroom because of the fear of getting COVID. But on the other side, I know kids who are 6th graders and 9th graders who will miss an opportunity of a lifetime to be moving from elementary school to the middle school, and enjoy that first year of middle school and first year of high school. So I hope the longer we delay, I hope we are not creating a lost generation, lost opportunities for our students, because these are lifelong experiences they carry with them for all their life. So this is my plea to the administration. As you plan, keep all those stakeholders in mind.
Very well said, Dr. Gupta. And if I might, I think we've given this item a sufficient amount of time. And Dr. Gupta, you just mentioned administration. And so as I am reflecting as one board member, I want to give administration a chance to work through the plans. I think the administration has heard the concerns of board members, and I'm sure that in the development of these plans going forward, as much of what has been said can be incorporated, and ultimately the board would make a decision, of course. But I want to just give an alliteration of A's, if you will, and then I have made my statement in 1 minute. And that is, I'm mindful of an acorn. These may be not very good comparisons, but an acorn is a seed, and it eventually grows into a new oak tree. And I have 2 daughters in Lynchburg City Schools as well. And my wife and I both hold earned doctorates, and our type 1 diabetic daughter is struggling in all advanced classes, and so it is not easy. And so I am thankful that we will do what we have to do to dig as deep as we can to make sure that every acorn can become the oak tree that they need to be due to the great work of Lynchburg City Schools. And so the academics and the arts and athletics, in my mind, all go together. There is academics and arts, and there's arts and academics and athletics. And we need to make sure that we are providing all of that. And it's going to be up to our administration to bring forth that plan. And I believe, board, if we would give them a chance, we will be able to then ultimately make appropriate decisions. And so with that being said, Dr. Edwards, what is the plan in terms of the board being briefed on the ongoing deliberations of this matter?
Every corner that I send out, every goalpost, weekly, we still have these conversations, which I think are going to be more fruitful as we move forward with our work sessions, and whenever we meet is an opportunity, and I'll continue to share information with you. Like I said, we're scheduling a press conference. We want to do some outreach with our families and staff, and you all are right in there in terms of the level of support that we need to make it happen. So we're going to continue to share information with you as soon as we have it to share.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. And again, it is no understatement that Lynchburg City Schools providing, as Dr. Brennan and others may have alluded to, Dr. Edwards certainly stated, we're an example, a model for many school divisions, 132 of them out throughout the Commonwealth. And so if there's no further discussion on that matter, we will govern ourselves accordingly. I do want to encourage each school board member to maintain contact with Dr. Edwards regarding this matter with your thoughts and reflections, and we will move forward accordingly. All right, this takes us to D2 in our meeting tonight, which is the COVID-19 dashboard. Dr. Sinha.
Yeah, I won't take a lot of time. Some highlights: our test positivity rate fell below 5%. That's a 7-day average. Hasn't been below there since mid-July. So that's quite a big deal. If you also look at new cases per week, they've come down dramatically, almost to the point where I'm a little bit suspicious that there might be a lag in reporting, but they are coming down. Now I posted this chart on my Facebook page, and somebody asked me, does that mean we're at herd immunity? And no. If you look at about 8.5% of Lynchburg has been infected, let's assume they're immune. Only about 12% of Lynchburg has had at least partial vaccination, for a total of about 20%. And herd immunity really is at around 95%. So we're a long way from that. On the second page, I do put the local metrics as well as the school metrics. They're still looking pretty good. And then I've added a little pie chart to show where we are on vaccinations. It's hard to get, you can get age-specific, but they don't really overlap with age-specific population numbers that I can find. I'm still working on that. So I'm just doing it as a whole. But as a whole in the city, about 6% have been fully vaccinated. A similar number have been partially vaccinated. Again, this is the 2-dose vaccines. The Johnson & Johnson, to my knowledge, isn't available yet. So all that we've had so far are the 2-dose. So about 12% have had at least 1 dose of the vaccine. So that's all I have to say.
Any questions for Dr. Sinha?
Oh, one other thing.
Yes.
Although things are coming down, everything I've been reading over the last couple of weeks indicates that the downward trend has sort of plateaued, both in the United States and globally. They attribute some of that to premature reopening, and we just heard that Texas opened 100% and ended their mask mandate, which might be a little bit soon. And the new variants. One of the things that has been happening with the new administration is there have been more emphasis on genomic surveillance so that we can track these variants. They're much more contagious. We know that the British one has been identified in Virginia, so just be careful. We have the light at the end of the tunnel. We're getting there, but be careful. Continue to mask up, distance, avoid crowds. If you're out with people, we're getting into warm weather season, do it outside. Let's keep our numbers where they are, low and low positivity rate, and get vaccinated. That's all I have to say.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. We really appreciate your presentation. This moves us now to Section E of our agenda, which has to do with public comments tonight. And in accordance to our policy BDDH, public participation, the school board welcomes requests and comments as established in the guidelines within that policy and as modified to comply with the governor's state of emergency. And so persons or groups wishing to address the school board may do so by choosing any of the following options. Send a written statement to the school board via the clerk, and those statements will be read during the public comment section of the school board meeting. Leave a voice message on the school board's clerk's phone line, and those messages will be played during the public comment section, and then address the board in person during the public meeting. School board, we will have each of these options utilized tonight, and we are grateful for each person that will come before us. Each person should include the name or the person submitting the comment, and individuals are limited to 3 minutes, and if you're representing a group, it would be 5 minutes, and all of the requisites that are required for you to have those things in by Wednesday, et cetera, are certainly noted and featured on board docs and before us. At this time, I would like to advance us in our process, and we're going to start with those who are in person tonight to make public comments. Persons appearing before the school board will not be allowed to campaign for public office or promote private business ventures, and should not use profanity or vulgar language or gestures, make comments about a public official or an employee that are not related to his or her official duties, engage in behavior that disrupts the meeting or intimidates others, or address the school board on issues that do not concern the services, policies, role, and/or responsibilities of the school board. As mentioned already, individual persons will be limited to 3, and if you're representing a group, it's 5, and this total period will be 30 minutes, and our deputy superintendent does a great job letting me know when we've reached our 30 minutes, and so we will govern ourselves accordingly. And our first public comment tonight in person will be Andrew Glover, who is addressing us about opening schools and is representing the conservative parents of Lynchburg. Mr. Glover?
Good evening, Lynchburg City School Board. My name is Andrew Glover. I am an LCS parent and representative of the conservative parents of Lynchburg, a group of over 200 Lynchburg families, teachers, and LCS staff members. Today is March 2nd. As educators and leaders in the educational space, I'm sure you're aware that today is Dr. Seuss Day, a day celebrated the esteemed author's birthday. As such, I think despite the call to remove Dr. Seuss from the classrooms, it would actually be highly appropriate to open my remarks today with a section from one of his books. But now, says the Onceler, now that you're here, the word of the Lorax seems perfectly clear. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. It's not. So catch, calls the Onceler. He let something fall. It's a trefoil seed, the last one of all. You're in charge of the last trefoil seed, and the trefoil trees are what everyone needs. Plant a new trefoil, treat it with care, give it clean water, and feed it fresh air. Grow a forest and protect it from axes that hack, and then the Lorax and all his friends will come back. Last Thursday, February 25th, the Virginia State Senate, in rare bipartisan fashion, voted to approve Senate Bill 1303 by a margin of 36-3, which in today's polarizing world makes it a near unanimous vote to recognize that remote and hybrid learning is failing thousands of our children and that they need to be in school 5 days a week for all grades. While this vote came 8 months late, it is a resounding confirmation of what Virginian and Lynchburg parents have been telling you was necessary to ensure our children's future. During that 8-month time frame, rather than trying to get kids back to school, this school board has used backdoor access to local political leaders to shut down schools, ridiculed parents, personified schoolyard bullying by name-calling and demeaning parents, going so as far as to refer to us as an infestation. You have publicly fought with teachers, and the policies that you have put in place have resulted in an exponential increase in failures of our students. My hope is that you will not spend the next 4 months continuing that trend. While the Virginia legislation is likely not to take effect until July 1st, the critical nature of getting our students back in the school building for face-to-face learning dictates that you listen to the intent of the law and open schools now for all grades. As such, I do want to return to the Lorax, because while the book is commonly seen as a warning against environmental harm, I think it also serves as an important warning to you regarding irreparable harm to something far more important than our trees, our children. So as I reread a few more highlights from the Lorax, place yourself inside the world of Dr. Seuss. The forest and the trees represent our school and our children. The thneed is the virus, and you are the onceler. Parents, taxpayers, and now the Virginia legislature are the Lorax, who have been begging you to stop your fixation on the thneed and speak for the trees. Look, Lorax, I said, there's no cause for alarm. I chopped just one tree. I'm doing no harm. I'm being quite useful. This thing is a thneed. The Lorax replied, sir, you're crazy with greed. There's no one on earth who would buy that fool thneed. I repeat, I speak for the thneed. I'm busy, I told him, shut up if you please. And if I got mad, and then I got mad, I got terribly mad and I yelled at the Lorax, listen here, Dad. I intend to go on doing what I do, which everyone needs. And at that very moment, we heard a loud whack. From outside the field came a sickening smack. Then we heard the tree fall, the very last truffle tree of them all. No more trees, no more thneeds, no more work to be done. Now all that was left beneath the bad-smelling sky was the empty factory, the Lorax and I. But now, says the onceler, now that you're here, the word of the Lorax is perfectly clear. Unless someone like you cares a whole awful lot, nothing is going to get better. It's not. It's not. Dr. Coleman, you, respectfully, I disagree with you. You said give the administration more time to figure this out. The administration has had 12 months to figure it out. I want to remind the school board, every single one of you has the authority to call a motion and move to open schools and direct the administration to open schools for all grades 5 days a week. You don't need her permission. You do it and show that you care about these students. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Glover, for your comments. Thank you so much. At this time, our next public comment in person, a very able individual, and Ross, I hope I'm getting this right. Is it Ross Tillis? Yes. Yes, indeed. He is coming with us representing Youngkin for governor.
Yes, Glenn Youngkin is running for governor of Virginia, but as I cannot campaign for him here at this moment, I do wish to address the school board and thank them for their time and for allowing me to talk about sort of what Glenn Youngkin would like to do with schools. He, of course, would like to see for them to open up. He would like to see for schools. Yes.
Mr. Tillis, first of all, we commend you for coming here, and I certainly, at a later point, would be delighted to hear any particulars. Our rules would not afford us to hear information about the platform of a particular candidate as such, if you wanted to speak to a particular issue relative to the schools. But we are so grateful you've come tonight, and we're looking forward to working with you in the future.
Perfect, and I wish to work with y'all in the future. Would I be able to act as a surrogate for Mr. Youngkin in his particular concerns about schools?
Yes, sir.
Perfect.
Each of our board members, Dr. Gupta, others, will reach out for you. Thank you for coming tonight.
Well, thank you.
All right. All right, at this time, we have a voice comment that Ms. Day or someone will queue up that we can hear.
Dear Dr. Edwards and members of the board, we trust that you have read the letter we forwarded you on Thursday, February 25th, 2021. In it, we stated our concerns about the alarming failure rate, the high percentage of LCS families that have disappeared from the system, as well as the remaining students who are bored, unmotivated, and disengaged. The current Return to Learn model in place is failing students across all socioeconomic backgrounds for two reasons. One, it offers little to no live teacher instruction, and two, it does not require students to attend any synchronous learning sessions, either in person or via Zoom. Simply providing online content and a teacher to answer questions is not virtual teaching. It does not allow teachers to establish relationships with their students, meaning it instills no sense of purpose or obligation within students. Even those students that are attending are mostly disconnected from their work because they are teaching themselves on their own timeline. Without live instruction, without requiring attendance, without penalties for late work, and without assigning enough work, school has become a hobby for those that choose to participate. The attempt to provide flexibility to families has completely and utterly failed. To shed light on our claims, we reached out to families asking them for statements on how the current model is affecting their students. Prefaced with the phrase, "Did you know?" Over 30 families responded. I will read you a small sampling of those statements here. Did you know when my high school senior went to optional in-person learning, there was no instruction, no dialogue, no engagement? He stays home now. He told me, why go? Nobody cares anymore. Did you know that neither of our children are required to attend any live learning sessions, no matter their academic grade in the class? Did you know that my daughter did not learn anything new on the day she was physically in school? The students at home were only on Zoom for about 15 minutes of the class. As soon as they logged off, the teachers were not permitted to teach new material. Why couldn't the students at home remain on Zoom and participate in the class? Did you know my high school junior used to have straight A's in all advanced and AP classes? He currently has 4 F's, 1 D, and 1 C. He says he can get caught up before the final grades are due. With no punishment for late work, he doesn't feel the need to do it on time, and thus has zero connection to what he's learning. He doesn't want to go to school on his 2 hybrid days because he says his teachers don't teach anyway. What's the point? He's checked out. Did you know that my child is taking math that is 2 years beyond his grade level, and yet he sees his teacher for 1 hour each week? Did you know that on average there are only 120 students in the building at EC Glass each day and the buses are empty? Did you know that my diligent student who has always completed work in a timely manner has not completed any work in 2 weeks and only 1 teacher noticed and reached out to her? Did you know that while virtual learning might be keeping my children and our families safer during a public health crisis, it has made it exponentially harder for them to stay motivated to learn? They miss their peers, they miss student conversation and interaction, they miss engagement with their teachers. There is no legitimate reason why every online course can't include regular live and synchronous classes with teachers and students. This model is being done elsewhere and it is much more effective. Did you know that as a core subject middle school teacher with 39 virtual learners, I have 20 that I have never seen, nor have they turned in any assignments, and 10 who stopped attending Zoom meetings before Thanksgiving? Did you know my 2nd grader has 1 or 2 check-in Zooms a week where she is not given any instruction by the teacher? Did you know that our city and community can and must do better for our children? It's time to engage the whole city and offer our children a real education. The responsibility now lies with you, the board, to change the model in place at this time. Allowing our teachers to engage with students through live instruction and then requiring students to be present for it is the only hope we have to reverse the current trend. By condoning the system in place right now, you are only failing our students, our families, our teachers, and ultimately our community. We challenge you to stop talking about plans and actively make a change today. Sincerely, concerned families of LCS.
I want to thank that particular group for your voice message. Thank you so much. The last portion of this will now be read by Vice Chair Dr. Brennan, the written public comments that we have.
Thank you, Dr. Coleman. So we have 2 written comments for public comments. The first is from Carl Luce, President of Lynchburg Education Association. Good evening to all. My name is Carl Luce, and I am President of the Lynchburg Education Association. I don't want to take up a lot of your time because I know you have a full plate tonight, but I did want to give you a different perspective on a few key issues as we reflect on this year and begin planning for the fall 2021. Much attention has been given to the number of student failures we've had this year, and this is a valid concern. Even this far into the year, employees continue to look for more and creative ways to engage struggling students. However, if we are going to compare ourselves to previous years, it should be noted that we are also more successful than we have been in the past. My own experience is not unique in LCS, but let me use it to explain what I mean. If we look at the other side of the spectrum, just like we saw an increase in failures, we also saw an increase in successes. Comparing the first quarter of this school year to the first quarter of last school year, I had a 33% overall increase in students with an A in my class. For my regular students, the number doubled. Comparing the second quarter of this year and last, there was a 90% increase in the number of students with A's, including a 300% increase for my regular education students. Similarly, the third quarter saw a 68% increase overall and a 40% increase in regular education classrooms. I've discussed this with my colleagues and they have noticed similar gains. So, as we talk about return to learn, we need to realize that this is a misnomer. We've never stopped learning. While we cannot ignore the struggles faced by too many students, we also need to acknowledge the success and growth experienced by many others, and acknowledge that the work of LCS staff across the division makes that happen each and every day. Thank you, Carl Luce, President, Lynchburg Education Association. The second public comment by email is from Narissa Broomley, and Ms. Broomley states, "To whom it may concern, my son is an 8th grader at Sandusky Middle School. It is crucial that our children return to a normal school week. As a parent, I am asking the school board that represents our children to not stop at 2nd grade, but to increase in-person learning. All children in LCS deserve to be in school." Thank you, Narissa Broomley. That was the last public comment in email formation.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan, and we want to thank all of those who have shared their comments tonight, and the board has heard all of the comments that have been made. At this time, unless there's an objection, the chair would like for us to take a 5-minute break so that board members can refresh themselves in whatever way these seats and so forth. And so if we could return back at 6:52, we'll take a 5-minute recess.
So James, I guess it was just a Jaden Scott note that she had to leave, so I guess it's just Jaden.
All right. Ms. Morrison, you there? Okay. All right, at this time, we will now move into section F of our meeting, which is our finance report, and Dr. Edwards will bring on Ms. Laconich.
Yes, and I'm going to bring on Ms. Laconich.
Good evening. Tonight we're presenting the financial report through January 31st. Our budget has remained the same as the last meeting at $101,886,769.97. The revenue received to date, we received 47.62%. Our expenditures to date are at 48.61%. And our expenditures, including all the encumbrances, is sitting at 86.67%. We did present the detailed revenue and expenditure, which is attached to the board docs at last Tuesday's Finance Committee meeting, but they are attached if you have any questions.
Any questions of Ms. Laconich, Dr. Gupta?
Is it a process to possible to channel the handouts you give out in Finance Committee to share with the rest of the board? Because I looked down the board docs, you have two standardized documents there, the CIP report and the revenue and expenditure sheet. But I know there may not be any other, but if there are any other handouts, to make them public as well as be available to the rest of the board.
Yes.
Mr. Harvey?
I was just going to say, yes, we've been working on that. I've been working with Ms. Day. The handouts that are provided during the Finance Committee will be attached to the meeting minutes that will then appear on board docs. So.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Any other questions relative to the finance report for January 31st, 2021? All right, thank you all for your comments. Thank you, Ms. Laconich. Moving now to section G, consent agenda. And tonight we do have on our consent agenda item 1, which is our school board work session minutes for January the 19th, 2021. And item 2, a human resources report. And item 3, religious exemption, in which all of the required information has been provided for the religious exemption that you have before you. I would like to, before we entertain a motion to approve the consent agenda, Ms. Morrison, is there any statement that you would like to make at this time?
Dr. Coleman, I will be abstaining from voting on the consent agenda.
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Morrison. And Ms. Morrison has been in conversation with me as the chair regarding her abstaining, and so we will now acknowledge that in the minutes. And is there a motion to approve the consent agenda?
I move that we approve the consent agenda.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. It's been motioned by Dr. Carter. Is there a second?
Second.
Second by Dr. Brennan. And if the abstention could be so noted by for Ms. Morrison, all those who are voting indicate by saying aye favorably.
Aye.
Okay. And those opposed, the motion carries. Thank you so much for that. We'll now move on to section H, which is our student representative comments, and we always look forward to this particular item. And we may have one of our student reps that had to leave us tonight, and we'll get that the next time. But whichever rep is here, the floor is yours to share your report. Grayson, are you there? Jaden? All right, well, we will move on, and we will see to it that the student representative reports are provided to the board. Now moves us to section I, school board committee reports. And at this time, if you have a committee report, you will be able to have the opportunity to acknowledge that. And so at this time, under I-1, the Finance Committee Chair, Mr. Harvey.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Finance Committee met on Tuesday, February 23rd at 3:30. Dr. Carter, Dr. Nillis, and I were present, as well as non-voting members, Dr. Coleman and Dr. Brennan. We were joined by Dr. Edwards, Ms. Lakonich, Mr. Gadsky, and Ms. Day was in attendance as the board clerk. We covered several items during our meeting. Ms. Lakonich presented the January financial reports and updated us on the CARES funding. It should be noted that our discussions regarding the health insurance will be delayed to next month, and that's basically just an updated presentation from our healthcare provider. The two main items that were focused on during our meeting were the capital improvement plan and the continuation of the development of the 2021-2022 budget. Mr. Steve Gadsky, our Senior Director of Finance and Operations, reviewed the current proposed CIP, and the committee discussed the current status of the plan. After much discussion, it was suggested by the administration that the plan stay as currently developed and no revisions would be issued at this time. Ms. Lakonich updated the committee on the anticipated state-directed requirements that will impact our salary discussions, and I'm sure that will be talked about at the appropriate time. Ms. Lakonich and Dr. Edwards shared the update on the 2021-2022 budget development process, and as the school board is well aware, we've been continuing along and working with that. Also, we have been working on the Finance Committee. I've been working with Ms. Day to ensure that many of the attachments, and this was what I was addressing to Dr. Gupta earlier, that many of the attachments will be included as part of our minutes, so will be available to board members on board docs. Our next meeting will be March 23rd at 3:30.
Any questions for our Finance Committee Chair? Thank you so much, Mr. Harvey. This will take us to item I-2, the Governor's School Committee. Mr. Harvey.
The Governor's School originally had a meeting tomorrow, but that meeting has been canceled, so just give heads up on that. We will reconvene at our April meeting.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey, for that notification. I-3, Laurel Regional School Committee Chair, Dr. Carter.
The Laurel Regional School Board next meeting will be May the 5th at 10 o'clock.
Thank you so much, Dr. Carter, for your notification. I-4, the STEM Academy Committee Chair, Dr. Michael Nillis.
The STEM Academy has not met since the last report.
Thank you so much, Dr. Nillis. And our last item under Section I, the Legislative Advocacy Committee Chair, Ms. Bell Evans.
We will meet Tuesday the 9th.
Tuesday the 9th. All right. Any questions for the Chair of the Legislative Advocacy and Community Relations Committee? Thank you, Ms. Evans. Now move to Section J, unfinished business. And under unfinished business, we have two items. The first is the VSBA Master Board Cohort invitation. And so at this time, we're going to continue the discussion that we had last meeting, and this is coming before us tonight for action as we need to alert VSBA as to our intentions. And I'm going to ask now briefly that Dr. Edwards would make any opening comment, followed by Dr. Brennan, and then we will open the floor for discussion.
Okay, thank you, Dr. Coleman. Again, I think I said a lot at the last meeting regarding my support for us as a governing body to participate in the VSBA Master Board training. I think that as we move forward, particularly with the new horizon, new challenges, our leadership and our ability to work cohesively as a group, to stay faithful to our strategic plan, and to move Lynchburg to the next level of greatness is going to be important. So I am in total support of us doing this, and I know that some dates have been provided, but and I think we have some flexibility as well, and we're going to open it up for discussion about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Dr. Brennan.
So I just want to briefly reiterate what I mentioned last time, because I think my audio system was not working very well, but I had talked previously with Mr. Ralph Fallon, who's chair of the Westmoreland Public Schools, who participated in this program last year, and they thought it was a very worthwhile experience, primarily for 4 reasons. One is he felt it really helped to build trust between the different board members. He felt it improved communication between the administration and board members, and that it reinforced board protocols. And also, finally, it emphasized the board functioning as a governance team, which included the board working well with the superintendent. He thought those were all worthwhile items, and he thought he would recommend that any board participate. Per the board's suggestion in our last meeting, Dr. Coleman and I have tried to put together a schedule that, a draft of a schedule that might work for us to participate in this format. As we know, there are 4 sessions as part of this curriculum. They are about a half a day. We're talking about time probably from 2 p.m. to 7 p.m. We were understanding that Friday was a good day for that, so we based our schedule on Friday being the day that most people wanted to participate, but it certainly is flexible to be other days. On the schedule, we tried to mark starting in June, going through October, which is the one that I sent you last evening. I added November to the package you have in front of you now because one of the board members was not able to do the October session, so we added another month with a possible other date. We put in some of the holidays because there's some question about, for example, July 4th holiday is on July 5th, and our board meeting is on the 6th, and whether we would meet that day or not, and we could adjust the cohort meeting based on that. So I know this is sort of like herding cats as far as trying to give a schedule out for this group of people to find 4 dates that will work. I kind of think that Dr. Coleman and I have spent a fair amount of time just on this piece of it as far as trying to do the schedule, and I think maybe we would appreciate input from the board as to whether they want to pursue this or not, because if the board does not want to pursue it, then I think we don't need to keep fiddling around with coming back with schedules for people.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Thank you, Dr. Brennan. If you will allow me just to make a brief statement. To be sure, in the city of Lynchburg, as a result of COVID in particular, as you can see, whether it be from Richmond or wherever, and we've been moving along anyway, there's this call for us to go deeper. All of the things that were stated in public comments, whether you agreed or did not agree with them, it's going to require us to go deeper, to do any of it. And so in my personal opinion, white, black, and brown students of every race and ethnicity or any other classification are depending on us being our best now. Our digging in deeper will only foster, or shall I say inspire, the same digging deeper from our administration and staff that has given us all they have, and yet more is being required of them. It is for this reason that I believe that all of the invited boards to the Master Board Cohort for 2021 have already accepted the invitation to go deeper, to build greater levels of trust, harmony, understanding, communication, so that the critical decisions before school boards can be made. And so I am trusting that we will have a very candid conversation on this at this time. And I see your hand, Bill, and I know everybody wants to speak, but I'll just go right ahead. Go ahead, Ms. Evans.
My only question about it is, we have done several things with VSBA before, and I'm just wondering what is different about this. Is it, I feel like the days that we've done, you know, our hours with them have not always, to me, at least on my end, been super productive as a group to move us along. So I'm wondering, are they bringing people in to teach different strategies? How are these lessons set up, or what is? I mean, I'm willing to put in the time if we do come out with some positive outcomes, but not to talk about the same things we've always talked about. Do you know where I'm coming from?
Oh, absolutely. Ms. Evans, your points are well taken. I'll take a brief stab at it just to make sure that we are clear. And I believe Attorney Towns is viewing. If not, she can affirm what I'm stating. The Department of Education, or by code, all 132 school boards have to have an annual training, one annual training that they must have that is dealing with norms and protocols and reviewing those norms and protocols. You can outfit that or outsource it, or whatever the appropriate term is, to anyone that's credible to do it. The 132 school boards in Virginia allow VSBA to do that training, but you could pick someone else to do it. That happens once a year. And what that is designed to do is to simply give boards an opportunity to work through their norms and protocols and to work through any other underlying issues that they may have in that one-day session. It is not by design to go deeper than that. And the VSBA staff takes that as an opportunity to facilitate discussion over against being in a training modality. There was a handout or an email that was sent to each board member that outlines the content of the 4 classes in which there will be a curriculum, a prepared curriculum that will go along with each class. And there will be facilitation by VSBA staff members and or any other additional persons that the board may want to have to come in to assist in going over the specific subject matters. Alongside of that, the board superintendent, board members can work with staff to make sure that the particulars of what we want to happen in each of those sessions can unfold.
Thank you.
All right, Mr. Harvey?
Just to state, I'm in favor of us participating in this, but I also appreciate exactly what Ms. Evans is talking about. Just if I would encourage the chair to encourage the Virginia School Board Association that we're not looking for just a facilitator. It would be beneficial to actually have instruction, because that's the best way for us to get some productive education and training opportunity out of this. You know, otherwise, again, I agree with her that if we're just going to revisit the same things and talk about the same things over and over again with a facilitator, that's a lot of time that we're being asked to commit for that. And I do share with you, I do have scheduling conflicts. I apologize for me. A scouting weekend starts at 5 o'clock on Friday afternoon, because that's usually when we're, heading to camp or something like that. So I did share with Dr. Brennan that I did have a conflict with a couple of the dates.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Other discussion? Dr. Carter, I'm sorry. Thank you.
I didn't have my hand raised, but I.
Okay, I saw a gesture. Go right ahead, Dr. Carter.
Well, I reached out to the Virginia School Board Association, and I found it interesting that of the 4 boards that were invited, 3 readily accepted, and we're the ones that are hanging on. Denial is a great benefactor, but I think this will be a great opportunity for us to learn. And it doesn't, the styles may be different, but I've always walked away, I wasn't always happy, but always walked away with more knowledge and was more introspective regarding some things that were said. And after thinking about it, it really made a lot of sense. And I think, like I stated before, because of the way our board is situated, we really don't have time to form relationships and really develop. And this will be an extra time that we can do that. And I think whatever learning they provide will be great. But at the same time, if we're not willing, if you can have eager participants, or you can have participants that you bring on dragging foot by our feet, and that wouldn't be productive.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Further discussion? Dr. Gupta.
I'll echo what I said last time. It's a great program, but the problem is no matter which training you go for orthopedic surgery, infectious disease, internal medicine, you get the same professor. So if the exercise purpose is socialization, I can understand, that works well. But the exercise purpose is academic and learning, then we ought to have specialists in the area to teach us. Otherwise, I walk away with nothing, just getting together and kumbaya and then move out and come back home happy. So if it's an academic exercise, I like to see it like an academic exercise. I mean, in schools, we have licensures for every area, every specialty, and they represent the whole school district. So let's mimic that and provide specialized training.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Other discussion? Dr. Nilles.
Yeah, my impression of this is it's an extended version of the normal VSBA retreat that we have, which I think is useful, but don't know that I want 20 hours of that. It's a big commitment. If we do go forward with this and do bring in some outside instructor facilitators, that's likely going to cost some additional money. Don't know what that is, but just pointing that out. The fee for this is really for the VSBA, and if there's additional expenses, then that would have to be, meals and stuff, or however we do this is not really an issue. But if you're talking about bringing in somebody to help facilitate, that's gonna that will be extra. So I'm sort of ambivalent about this. Like I said, I did reach out to a board member that was a master board participant. His feedback was he thought it was useful. They talked through a lot of things, but developed better communication. It was a different board dynamic, but sounded very similar to training sessions that we've been through, just a longer one. So.
Thank you, Dr. Nilles. Any further comments from any of us? Yes, Ms. Morrison?
I would like to echo the comments of Mrs. Evans and Mr. Harvey and Dr. Gupta and Dr. Nilles. I think that if we can benefit from this training, then we would all embrace it. But we want to make sure that we're not doing more of what we've done before. I would also urge us not to start this training in June because we may have a different board in July. We may have some different board members. And I spoke with Ms. Bosserman this morning, and she said if we started in June and we have a different board in July, we really aren't gaining any ground. We would have to start all over.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. before we start trying to figure out what we want to do, is there anyone else would like to weigh in on the discussion? All right. Obviously, at this point, there would need to be a motion in which the board can vote up or down. As it relates to the dates, we have also been given instruction that this could possibly carry over to 2022. The goal would be to complete the master board training by November, by the November convention, which is around November the 17th, 18th, somewhere in that time period. And so a July to November window with 4 sessions spread out over time at a day and times that all nine board members and the superintendent could agree on. The staff is willing to be flexible with us. If we needed to carry it over into 2022, they are also okay with that as well, if that would help manage the time load for the board. And so they are perfectly willing to work with us in whatever way that the board would like to do. In terms of the value of the training, we certainly, between Dr. Edwards and board leadership, will do all we can to express these concerns that have been presented to us in the work session and tonight. What is the pleasure of the board?
Dr. Coleman?
Yes, Dr. Miller,
Like,
Dr. Brennan?
Yeah, as I mentioned before, I think that before we move on to picking dates or things, we decide what the board would like to do, and then we can move on to part 2. I think that I'm a little more optimistic than other people. I think this will be a different session than we've gotten before. I think the curriculum is laid out and is different. As we said before, it's really an honor for us to be invited. This is not because we're having problems, it's because they see us as a board that deserves to move up to a higher level. I think Dr. Edwards has commented on the fact that she thinks it would be beneficial for us as far as working better together as a board and also working with administration. So even though I too are not looking for things to do to fill up my schedule, I don't see this as an individual achievement that we're going to do. I think this is something that would make us a better board. So I would like to at least put it out as a motion that we participate in the master board cohort invitation, and if the board decides to do that, then we can decide at a later date what dates we will actually use.
All right, there's a motion on the floor for us to accept the invitation to be a part of the master board cohort. Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Carter. The chair would now entertain any further discussion or questions on the motion. Would the maker of the motion or the person who gave the second want to make any further comments in support of the motion that you've made or seconded?
No, thank you.
All right.
I have a question. So this is just saying yes or no. This is not saying yes to any dates or any just...
Right. The maker of the motion has put it in a 2-part form in which we are voting now to accept the invitation only, yes or no. Then we'll come back. Rather than lengthen the meeting, this will not work unless we can get all 10 of us to agree on the date and the times, and we can work on that part. All right, well, at this time, I'm going to then, if there's no further discussion, ask our clerk to call the roll on the vote. If you're voting yes, you are in favor of us participating in the master board cohort. If you are voting no, it is not so much that you don't support it, it's just that that's your vote. All right.
School Board Member Evans?
Yes.
School Board Member Morrison? Yes. School Board Member Dr. Carter?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Brennan?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Nillis?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Sinha?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Gupta?
Yes.
School Board Member Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Thank you, Board. We will diligently begin to go to work to find a schedule that will be acceptable to the entire board. That now moves us in our agenda to J2, item 2, and Dr. Edwards is going to lead us in this very important discussion on our FY 2021-22 operating budget.
Absolutely. So first, let me just reiterate, we may have some new folks joining us for the first time, that the board is reviewing items that are projected needs for consideration and discussion. We will have a public budget hearing on March 16th at 5 o'clock, where I'll give a short presentation and the public can comment on the budget as well. Following the public budget hearing, we will have a board work session on the budget, at which point, if it is amenable, the board will vote on the budget. We may have to do some priorities and some other things moving forward. If necessary, we can move that to March 30th, although I'm hopeful that we can get it done on the 16th, because we may be going to City Council on March 30th to present the budget. So nothing tonight or any other night is in stone until the board takes an official vote. So I just want to remind everyone of that. I gave you all an updated projected sheet. I try to update it after every board meeting or event where maybe even the amend team meets. So the one that you have in print and the one that is in the agenda should say revised following school board work session on 2/16/2021. This is probably about our 5th copy. And as we go down that list, I'm going to go right to number 2 and take a quick pause, because this is something that the board voted for previously. And part of that vote was to give our staff a mid-year step increase, which has occurred. Thank you to the payroll and finance department for making that happen rather quickly. And since then, at the time that we took that vote, the governor was looking at a 2% bonus, and there was speculation that it might be a 2% raise, and then there was coming out of the General Assembly possibly a 3% raise and a 5% raise. Over the weekend, we learned that the strongest candidate right now is the 5% raise. What you have before you that we have calculated is a 1.5% increase in the current year, a 0.5% increase when we do the step in the next year, and we were adding somewhere around a 1.5% cost of living, which up until this past weekend would have given us about a 3.5% increase when it was all said and done. We want to go back and revisit that, because we do think the 5% has some traction and could possibly move forward. Plus, we absolutely think our staff deserve it. So what we're going to do is, or they've been working on, I just did not want to rush them, is what is that figure when we add an additional probably close to 1.5% on that cost of living to get it up to about a 5%. And Ms. Lakonich, did I butcher it, or you want to add to that?
No, you did great. We were recommending that we look at the 5%, and that's the recommendation we had received, and that's what we were looking at with the House, which had the 5% verbiage in it.
Okay. So that is just one of our priorities. We will have those numbers for you, and I will try to get it to you in advance of the board meeting if I have all the numbers worked out, so that you're not waiting to receive it at the board meeting. And as we go through, on the second page, item number 22, after much discussion, we have pulled that item based on the team that we have in place right now. And I think I said this before, and maybe at the Finance Committee meeting, that we want to see what the current HR team, which has been reorganized, can do before we add the additional position. So we did pull them. And I noted that there. Number 23, we have some grant funding that will support the school psychologists. And remember, part of this is looking, even though we have them in operating budget, to see if there are other places or other funds that can support this. It is also something that is much needed now, and we do know that school psychologists are very difficult. That's one of those hard-to-fill positions. So we really want to get that one moving forward. It is much needed, and it can be funded out of grant funds. So we took that out of the operating budget request, so you see an NA there for that. Also, moving forward, what is left on our agenda above the CARES line, we have two items. Item number 29 is the part-time athletic director at EC Glass. And there was a request for additional information prior to the board having a discussion on that. I believe I sent you both a written sheet and a spreadsheet of participation for the students who are participating in sports at both Glass and at Heritage. So I think we can move to that item and have a little discussion on that item. And
all right, you've heard from the superintendent, and the floor is now open for discussion on the said item.
29?
29, yes, which is the athletic director part-time.
All right, Ms. Evans?
I think after looking at what you sent us and knowing how many they have to cover there, I think there's no way we cannot approve this. I think it's clear that EC Glass needs that part-time position for the athletic director.
Thank you, Ms. Evans. Ms. Morrison, do you want to comment on this matter?
And one of the concerns that they have at EC Glass is that they often have home contests going on at both City Stadium and the EC Glass campus, where most of the Heritage High School athletic events occur on the Heritage High School campus. And this is greatly needed to support additional supervision of students and fans. After looking at that information, I am in support of adding this position.
Morrison, I was aware that you had a comment, so the floor is open, generally speaking now. Dr. Gupta.
No, I'm not debating whether this position is important or not important, but consistently as a broken record, I've been saying all these new positions, I don't see a source of funding to sustain them on an ongoing basis. So, and that stays for this position too, unless the administration has a sustainable source of funding to sustain them beyond the CARES Act money.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Is anyone else? Dr. Nilles.
Yeah, I appreciate the additional information that was provided. One question I had was, have they looked at maybe trying to repurpose some of the number of coaching positions that are there and fold those into an athletic? I don't know if all those positions are, if there's stipends associated with those, or are those all volunteers, but the number of coaches kind of caught my eye in terms of the number of teams. Anyway, so.
I did not ask that question. If you'd like me to go back and ask them.
Yeah, I mean, I'd be interested in knowing, what's is there some flexibility there to repurpose some of those positions and at least partially fund this position? I mean, I'm not arguing against the need. It comes down to funding.
Thank you, Dr. Nilles. Anyone want to speak to that or additional statements? Mr. Harvey?
I think Dr. Nilles has a valid point and a good question. I guess one of the questions I would then ask, typically I think of an assistant athletic director as being more of a procedures and organization and management type position, whereas a coach might have a specific interest in a specific sport. So I would also be interested in what the answer would be about, is there a way to possibly reconcile those positions, because I think that'd be beneficial to our budget. But I could also see that it would come back and say that might not be possible simply because of the responsibilities of those two different positions.
Anyone else would like to speak to this item number 29? Either have already spoken. And again, Ms. Morrison, I know that you have taken a deeper dive into this, and I don't know if you have any further input relative to the question that Dr. Nillis raised. I know Dr. Edwards will be looking into it. But is there any further discussion on this item? All right, please the board that we put this on hold until our work session, or are we prepared to deal with it tonight?
I would be prepared for us to look at it tonight, simply because my understanding of the positions would be one is more of a administrative planning organizational position where coaching is a little bit different position. So
again, this is a part of a process to ultimately vote on the entire budget that we would take over. Is there a motion regarding item 29?
I guess I move to defer this to the work session till we get some additional information that was requested.
All right, and so we would in essence put this on the table or wait until the next session. There's a motion on the floor to do that concerning item 29. Is there a second? You'd be seconding, not that you're voting against this, but allowing time for the questions to be answered. Is there a second to Dr. Nillis's motion? Hearing no second and the motion fails, is there another motion?
I move that we approve item 29.
All right, the motion is on the floor to the approval of item 29. Is there a second to that motion?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Carter. Any further questions or discussion on this item? Hearing none, we will ask our clerk to call the roll.
School Board Member Evans?
Yes.
School Board Member Morrison?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Carter?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Brennan?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Nillis?
No.
School Board Member Dr. Sinha?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Gupta?
No.
School Board Member Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
Could you give us the results of that, please, Madam Clerk?
Yes vote 7, no 2.
That item is now passed and moving along in the consideration. Dr. Edwards?
Okay, so on page 3, the only other item that is still outstanding is the human resources system, and I briefly discussed this, I think at the Finance Committee, maybe even at the last meeting. It is left as a TBD because what I want to have happen is for all of my staff members who are going to interface with that system, in addition to the HR department, you have the end user being the building principals, you have finance having an interface with it, and depending upon what add-ons, it could be an add-on, it could be a system, it is a TBD, but it will be something that will probably come up in the middle of next year. So I don't want it to get lost and have anyone say, where did this come from? We didn't know that this was a consideration. But I don't have a price tag for it right now. So I just am looking for the support to say, yes, go ahead and investigate finding an HR system that will consolidate, but also be beneficial and efficient for multiple departments, not just HR.
All right. I'm trusting that board members are clear on what Dr. Edwards is asking. If not, she can restate. But Dr. Gupta.
It's difficult to vote on something which is TBD because we don't know the cost and benefits of it at this point in time. So for me to make an informed decision, the data or the information is not there. And knowing that HR is in influx because the position was pulled out and you're integrating system into that department, because buying a software is easy, implementation of the software is a torturous process. Mm-hmm. So do we have the manpower to do that? It's a big dark cloud right now. So it'll be difficult to vote yea or nay for me at this point in time.
So just so that I can respond, I would not, what I'm asking you to vote for is in concept, but not the actual dollar amount. I would have to bring that back to you because it would be a dollar amount that you would then say yay or nay at that point for the actual dollar amount.
So what the superintendent is not asking us to deal with the estimated cost. Obviously, that is to be determined, but there's no need for administration to pursue this issue further if the board conceptually doesn't see it as worth the further work and bringing that back to us at our March work session. All right, Dr. Sinha and then Mr. Harvey.
Well, then I would suggest that since that's the case, we take it out of the budget, do the research and the, pursue looking into it by all means. Do the cost-benefit analysis. I don't know what our current system is like and what limited capabilities it might have. And you're right, the cost of implementation and moving the system over to a new platform. So we would need more detailed information about what all is involved and what you're hoping for principals to be able to do with it in terms of capabilities, performance evaluations, or whatever is folded into that.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. Mr. Harvey.
Yeah, I was going to ask sort of the same thing more as a procedural question. Was it something that we really needed to be voting on, or if we should really just be expressing our support for the administration to actually research this thing out, to look at it holistically, because as we discussed at the Finance Committee meeting, this is going to impact many departments. It's going to tie in with not only HR, but finance, B&G, all the different departments that we have. And so I would be one to say that as an individual board member, I would be in support of the administration pursuing this and doing the legwork and getting together a package that we could at a later date review the pros and cons and as well as the cost.
Dr. Gupta.
The ERP systems are not novelty anymore. And what I'm hearing from you is HR is one module. It has finance. These ERP systems are different modules. And the cost can escalate from a couple of $100,000 to millions of dollars, how we are pursuing and how we are going with it. On top of that, the implementation costs. So to me personally, discussing it, without any information is very difficult.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Ms. Morrison, do you have any comments on this matter?
I agree with Dr. Gupta. I can't vote on something that I don't know anything about.
If it pleases the board, I think that we would not need to vote on this tonight. I think unless there's objection, the concept and the need is obviously there based upon this coming to us, but we will take this item out of the budget as it stands at the present time, and they will come back with the appropriate cost analysis and details relative at our work session.
Yes.
All right? Okay. All right, Dr. Edwards.
Okay, so the rest of...
Mr. Harvey?
I'm sorry, before we move forward, I did have a question going back to item number 2, just briefly.
Okay.
Item 2?
Yeah, that deals with the state legislature and the compensation for our staff. Is that mandate, is the state looking to also help fund that mandate? Or is that going to be simply left to the localities? And I know that's a loaded question.
They fund the SOQ portion of it. We always have a match for the rest of the employees, even if it's 3%, it's the same.
Okay. So it will involve a local component to that we will have to involve.
We'd get a little more
council.
Money, but we'd have to add a little more money.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, thank you.
Dr. Gupta?
Just for Ms. Lakanich, if later on you can share, how much does it cost for the division to give 1% raise across the board? Organizations have that figure in mind. So what's the dollar amount for 1% across the board?
When we were preparing for the 2% bonus, we had actually put a 1.5% cost of living adjustment into that. So just to give you an idea of the 1.5%, it costs us about $925,000.
So 1% is about $600-some thousand.
Somewhere around there. I'd have to just verify. And in the governor's proposed, he had, because it was a bonus, there was a bonus revenue line, and that was around $553,000. In the state proposed, because it had the 3%, that line was not in there because it was no longer a bonus, and there was a compensation supplement line, and that was around $996,000. So we went from 553 to 996. The House has the 5% language in it, and they were providing $1.6 million to help assist with the cost.
Thank you, Ms. Laconich, for that information. Dr. Carter.
Now, will this be a phased-in type of increase, or will both the odd and even employees receive this at the same time?
The people who would get the increase, unless you're on that odd or even year, you'll get the cost of living adjustment. You might not get a step increase if your step didn't increase, but that will all be July 1.
All right, Dr. Gupta.
I just want to make one more statement for, some of our teachers are retiring on June 30th, and we had a step freeze for a while, and they have, so if you are up for an increase on July 1st, even or odd, whichever year, will they be left out? Will they get the prorated benefit or no?
They would have received whatever increase in the current year, but not an increase for the year that they're not here.
All right, thank you. So thank you for that. We can now go back where you were moving us, Dr. Edwards.
Okay, so for items 101 all the way down to 113, it all says possible CARES funding. Much of that is to support the creation of a remote academy, particularly for the fall, for students who want to continue remote, for homeschool students who want to access our curriculum. This is what Ms. Pugh was talking about as one of the groups. We want to do it using the CARES funding to start as a startup, as a pilot program. And of course, the devil's in the details, but we don't know. If you ask me today, how many families said they're ready to go to that remote academy, we don't know to what degree, how many families. So we're guesstimating here out of part of that second CARES funding, the $12 million, it's not the full $12 million, obviously, on things that we need. There are also some other things in there that are CARES related, and one of them being the first item, 101, the non-Medicaid dependent to support students' mental health and trauma. We do know that some kids are suffering. We don't know to what degree they're going to need support and services, and we want to be able to do that in a quick manner that is not dictated by some of the challenges we had with Medicaid. You'll also see some continuation of our tutoring program in there for students who, and again, during the summer and during the fall, we want to make sure that everybody catches up. And by catch up, that means catch up to your potential, not necessarily just targeting kids who were failing or non-participatory, but it could be more than that, as Ms. Pugh said. And then you'll see some of the things for remote academies, and the board had also asked that 2 of those behavioral coaches be moved back here. So this CARES funding is not an operating, but one of the reasons why I put it on the budget, because if it's something that we do next year, and I think some of that, the legislation about in-person learning and being able to offer things expires in August 2022. But that being said, if we put something in place and it works, and then we are looking at, Dr. Gupta, how do you sustain that beyond the CARES funding going forward? And I'm just going to be as transparent as possible that everybody knows that I would love to go back to council in the future year, understand where we are in the middle of the pandemic, and I understand where they are in terms of some of their challenges right now. And, we are fortunate that we have CARES money right now. In in a year from now or 2 years from now, we still have to negotiate the sustainable money that we need with City Council. And if that means that in 2 years, I'm going to ask City Council for $42 million, which is what we got 2 years ago, I'm prepared to do that. I am prepared to move forward and say, hey, 4 years ago, you supported us at this level. We were fortunate to have CARES funding. We used it to the best of our ability and in line with what, the federal government said we could. And here we are now, and here are the needs along with the data that supports those needs. So what I'm really asking the board for is in concept is as we move forward in the fall, a lot of this is a separate remote academy. And I don't want to get to the fall and say, oh, let's offer some remote learning and have it fall on the existing teachers. We want the existing teachers to get back to 5 days a week of in-person learning where that is their major focus, the kids in front of them, and then have a separate group of individuals. Now, some of those may be, depending upon class size or what have you, or collapsing positions, because that's our first way of doing it. If we have an extra, elementary teacher here or there, the first choice would be to put them in the remote academy and not hire somebody new. So it's a conceptual thing that I need to know if that is a direction that the board wants to go.
All right, feedback from the board, Dr. Gupta.
I have not seen any blueprints of virtual academy / remote academy. You may have it. Would it be possible for you to share with the board?
I'm sorry, you said
the blueprint of this idea. What does it entail? What will it involve? If you're applying the same thing for a grant, they'll ask all these documents to support what is this idea, what are the cost benefits of this, how will it be implemented, the timeline, and the resources needed. So I have not seen any of that. So do you have that, or is it just still very early stages of concept?
And this, if you go back to the beginning of the meeting when Ms. Pugh talked about the 5 groups that are in the planning stages, on the back page of your Return to Learn handout, you'll see Virtual Academy is one of those 5 groups.
These are 2 bullet points. That's not a blueprint.
I'm sorry?
These are bullet points. What I'm saying is
No, I understand, but you want the details of what exactly it looks like, and we don't have the details of what exactly it looks like. What I'm telling you is what we would like to do is start planning for it. So in terms of a remote academy, the one thing that we do know is it's not your in-person teacher trying to do that and then have an hour or nighttime to do remote. It is a separate academy where kids would have to demonstrate that this type of learning works for them. So if I'm not successful, like right now in a remote learning, this is not where I'm going to be allowed to participate. I would have to be in full in-person learning. We do have some students who this model works for them, the model of remote learning. They've demonstrated that they can balance and can keep up and do what they need to do. We also know in just conversation, because there's multiple options of how you can do this, that you might actually have kids who have in person, but they want a very unique class that we don't have a teacher for, but we can add from our remote academy, maybe add this as an option that an in-person kid could take one remote learning class. Or a homeschooling kid who doesn't want a full 5-day-a-week, 7-hour-a-day program could actually participate in our remote learning, and that allows the family to still do some of the home learning that they like to do, as well as get the LCS benefit. So I'm just giving you the initial generated ideas that that the team is talking about, but we do know that we're going to need some level of supervision. We do know that particularly if you're talking about high school students, you want to make sure that if they're in a remote learning program that they get all their verified credits, that they're eligible for college and the whole 9 yards. We don't want to mess any of that up as well.
Somebody else, I have one more question.
Go right ahead, Dr.
I know you identified some gaps, and that's what I was heading to. What gaps exist which the remote academy will fulfill? But things like organizational structure. What will be the structure to run this academy? You'll have a director, an assistant director, you're asking for administrative assistants. So in your mind, you have an idea of that structure, and asking that, if it's possible, to share that with the board.
Okay. What we did in projecting numbers, just because we knew we had to put some numbers down there, we do have, if you look in here, we did say it should have its own separate administrator or administrative team. It should have its own secretarial staff. It should have its own support staff in terms of counseling services. It should have some tech support because it's a remote learning program. So those items, if you just want an outline of that, I can certainly provide you that. But in terms of what does the coursework look like, what grades are you targeting, I don't have those details. I just want to make sure I give you what you...
But you have it somewhere, this plan laid out in black and white? Or all verbal?
Ms. Pugh, it's getting there. I would
getting
say
there,
it's in
but
pencil.
It's in pencil, but they're wanting to understand the board's support so that they can move ahead with the details of planning. If the board were to come back and say we're not in support of an LCS virtual or remote academy, then the work that they do for the next couple of months will not come, won't bear any fruit. And so I think we're looking for, number one, support in terms of the concept of providing virtual, but we can certainly get you some of what we do know in more detail than what I provided for you on the one-page handout.
Thank you so much, Ms. Pugh. Dr. Sinha.
Would an appropriate way to conceptualize the remote academy be as if you were opening a new school building? Without the building, of course, because this isn't for remediation and catching up. This is a separate school for students who really thrive or want that virtual environment, correct?
Yes.
And that has been the conversation about.
Right, and so then it does make sense that you have separate administration, support staff, and all that stuff. So what remains to be seen is the extent to which, your estimate of 10 additional teachers is adequate or overkill. I doubt it's overkill. Because you don't right now know what demand for that would be or how that would be structured. And would that be for all grades? So it would be like a one-room schoolhouse, if you will? Not quite, but because my concern there is that, when you get into high school and subjects, you have faculty specialization, and that might be difficult to provide, but I'm sure you've considered that.
There are opportunities for existing staff to teach using an existing learning management system, opportunities for us to partner with, using Edgenuity or Virtual Virginia courses. So it depends on what the need is. And I can imagine as you get to high school, and if you wanted, advanced Italian, might be a little bit difficult to dedicate a full Italian teacher to teaching a level of advanced Italian. We might have to partner and look at that a little differently than if you were offering second grade. And even looking at some of the options, and again, the group is in the exploratory stages looking at all possibilities. There's full day, full-blown remote academy for second grade, and then there's math and reading remote academy for second grade, right? So it varies, and I think what's going to dictate what we do is what our community is asking us for. Once we get back to in-person learning, we'll have a sense of how many of our kids are actually with us, because those aren't the kids that we are necessarily targeting, and then how many kids want to continue. And then an area that we have not explored a significant partnership with outside of what is mandated is homeschool. We have not, we follow homeschool rules and we've managed them according to code, but we haven't invited them to be part of the LCS family where homeschool kids are counted as LCS kids. And that's a whole new thing that the board would have to say, yes, we absolutely are looking into doing that.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. I do want to remind the board it is 7:56. We have to get to Section K, in which we have 3 items, and I believe that gut of this is a conceptual matter that we only need to determine. Mr. Harvey.
Yeah, I was just going to note, I just ran the numbers real quick. I mean, we're talking about 1.1 excluding the space lease portion of this. I've talked with a couple of students who have found working remotely to be an incredible experience and something that they would participate in. And I actually Sunday was talking with one of such students about the option of there being a remote academy, a full-blown option through continuing their education if they so chose to do that. And they were very excited about that opportunity. So I, for one, would be in support of us pursuing this. I understand Dr. Gupta's concern about seeing sort of the roadmap, but I guess I can kind of read between the lines here a little bit with what you're trying to set up, and I don't know that how deep in the weeds, are we to get as a board with this. But I, for one, would be in support of the idea of an academy, and I feel like that the estimated costs for at least the next 2 years are already covered by some funding that we have in place, and we can test this out. And if it works, then we might want to continue to pursue it and continue to refine it. If it doesn't work, we can say, hey, we gave it a shot, and it's just not for us.
I want to recognize Dr. Brennan, then we'll come back to Dr. Gupta.
I also am in support of the remote academy in light of the experience we've had this year, and clearly there will be students and teachers who would want to benefit from that model. One of my two nieces, I'm sure, would love to stay at home and remotely participate, and it would probably be more beneficial for her. So, but switching gears a little bit, Dr. Edwards, so this is obviously from our CARES funding, and as Mr. Harvey pointed out, it's a relatively small amount of that. So, but what are we, for next year as far as July and the summer, I guess, do we put CARES funding towards summer school and issues that we're going to address to help the students who have suffered for this year that we've talked about? Where will that, or how will that piece of the puzzle work?
Yes, the short answer to that is the summer school summer programs, I should say, that Ms. Pugh talked about. We are absolutely using CARES money because the big focus of that, and I don't have any talking points where you talked about intervention, retention intervention, gap filling, skills building. So all of those summer plans, we just naturally knew that would be a CARES funding. And in my opinion, that's not optional. So that's not something where, hey, do we want to do it? We absolutely need to do that. But this may be something is this something that the board is interested in doing, which is why it's showing up as its own kind of item.
You have a follow-up? Okay, thank you.
Much.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards. Dr. Gupta.
I don't want people to walk away that $1 million is a small potato in a town where the median income is $20,819. So not many people are making $1 million to just bet on in day in, day out. Having said that, one piece, Dr. Edwards, I don't see, which I'd like your group to consider, is how to reduce the digital divide. People who love online learning right now may have high-speed internet in their home. So I'm looking at kids whom you're trying to provide the T-Mobile access. And I don't see anything here about the end user. I see it from a delivery perspective, but nothing from the student perspective, how will this remote academy reduce the digital divide in the city so that our remote learners are getting equal access to that education, not only the rich kids, the poor kids too.
Okay. So are you speaking in terms of just making sure that they have access the same way we've provided MiFis and devices and
For it to be successful and have equal opportunity for all.
If there are students and they're in our program, I think our goal was to provide all of our students with devices. The MiFi, and your point is well taken in terms of going forward and making sure that kids have access to high-speed internet. And that's not in here, but it might be something that we definitely bring to the team to include. The other thing is just, and I don't know if the city has any initiatives, and I think we briefly talked about what Martinsville was doing in terms of making the city itself more Wi-Fi enabled for its citizens to do that, and whether or not Lynchburg City has any plans of doing that as well, so that we as a school division are not always trying to pay the cable bills of, the access bills for families.
Thank you. And the Martinsville School Board is certainly willing to work with us, Dr. Edwards, in any way possible with that matter. Ms. Evans.
I'm just going to say, I'm a big supporter of this too, as long as we can keep it separate from the responsibilities of the teachers in the classroom. Yeah. And I think that's where we've had some issues this year of things being hard, and this can't be their responsibility to teach as well.
And the intent is to have dedicated staff for in-person learning and dedicated staff for the remote academy. So where we can, we will, as Dr. Edwards said, maybe, depending on the number that are enrolled in the remote academy, maybe be able to use teachers that we already have. But for some, we may need to hire some additional teachers, and that's why the 10 teacher positions are there. But that is definitely the, one factor that will be a reality if this academy comes to fruition, that they will have their own dedicated staff.
And that has been made clear to us. And so if there's no unreadiness to it, I realize that, that the board should be clear that conceptually we need to look into this. It's the way of the future, and if we can learn from this and figure out how to offer this, will ultimately help our ADM and provide many other opportunities for us as well. So Dr. Edwards, unless there's objection from anyone on the board, I think you can move forward and work out the specificities of what needs to happen.
Okay. And may I make one comment before we leave this budget
yes.
area? And I just want to say Dr. Nilla's point is very well taken. One of the things that we are constantly doing as a team is go back and look at, hey, is there a different way to fund this? Can we collapse this? Did we, could we fill it with a attrition, a resignation, or a retirement that we no longer need to fill? So, and we do try to do due diligence, even when you all vote in favor of. We recognize the need for the data and still want to bring you the data. So I wanted to just say to Dr. Nillis, I will still explore that. And if there's a way to have a cost savings, you saw some things we pulled off because we put in grants. We're committed to doing that. We will continue to do that, and we'll continue to share that with you. So.
Well said, Dr. Edwards, and we again want to remind the public as well as our entire Lynchburg City School family that this process is ongoing. And last year there were things that didn't quite make it, and they are showing up here. And there may be other things that come up. And it's a process, and for future years, we certainly can see what is possible going forward. All right, thank the board for your deliberations concerning J2. That now moves us to section K of our agenda. And the first item is governance policy updates, and this is coming to us tonight as discussion with the potential of being action. And I think that some board members may appreciate a movement to action on this matter tonight. Dr. Edwards?
Yep. So in 2018, pre-COVID, when we adopted this policy, one of the things that we put in it, it wasn't in the VSBA version, is we excluded closed meetings as a reason. People could not participate electronically in closed meetings. And again, at the time that we first adopted this, that was in 2018, before we had COVID. And now that we're in COVID and we see the need for electronic participation, and we've been fortunate that we have not had to have too many closed meetings, but I anticipate as we move forward, there may be a need to have a closed meeting in accordance with what we can legally with Attorney Towns. But she recommended that I bring this back to the board and see that whether or not we still want to have that exclusion based on the closed meeting policy, or if we want to allow electronic participation in a closed meeting, which really means we would leave this open area, go into a room, which I think Ms. Day may have actually found one for Dunbar if we need to do that here, and then we would log in with the board member so that the board member can participate by Zoom. It would not be publicly broadcast or anything like that. It would just be that one board member and not the entire team that's on there. So if you look at the policy, it's just striking out the wording that says except closed meetings as outlined in BDC, which is the closed meeting policy.
What is the, Dr. Brennan?
So this policy was reviewed by the governance work group, and as Dr. Edwards said, apparently this is something that we added on our own. It was not VSBA suggestion back in the pre-COVID era, and also that there are multiple other school boards that do allow this process in their closed meetings. So we felt as a group, as a working group, that we thought this was an appropriate thing for the board to do. So I would, if it's okay with the chair or the board, I'd be willing to make a motion that we act on this rather than discuss it further.
All right, and there's a motion on the floor, and Dr. Nillis's point is, and let us hear your point.
So my understanding that this was actually a state requirement, that there not be electronic participation, and that was at the beginning when you were allowed electronic participation on an exception basis. And I'm just, that's my understanding. So that's.
And Dr. Nillis, your understanding is heard by the board. Attorney Towns has looked into this matter, and as Dr. Brennan stated, each of us probably have observed school board meetings where the entire group is meeting electronically, and they go into closed meeting and come out and do what they need to do. And so the Code of Virginia, as I understand it, would support us doing this, and this was not VSBA recommended language, and I was not a part of the board. Maybe I was and don't remember that
Is
did
Attorney
that.
Towns with us, Dr. Coleman?
Attorney, I don't think so. Attorney Towns, are you participating electronically?
Yes, I am.
Could you please comment on that? Thank you, Dr. Brennan.
It's not a state requirement. That was something that was added by the board at the time. My understanding is perhaps some concerns about the ability to secure the communications and keep the meeting closed. But it's not a requirement of the state code and not a requirement for any of the electronic meeting requirements that have been put in place since the COVID pandemic has been in place with the governor's amendments and the various continuity of government ordinances. So this is something that you all can do, and it will be in compliance with state code.
Thank you, Attorney Towns. Is there any further discussion? In fact, there was a motion on the floor, and Dr. Nillis and the chair allowed that, and I'm glad I did, but I also know that it is our custom to hear something the first time for discussion. This chair is not seeking to ignore that. It is just to acknowledge, as Dr. Edwards stated, that there could virtually be a need to go into a closed meeting for whatever the reason, and this would not allow us to do that. And that's why we're doing this. So is there a second to the motion? Mr. Harvey?
I will second the motion simply because I would like to have it placed on the table for discussion.
Yes, thank you so much. So it's a motion by Dr. Brennan, seconded by Mr. Harvey, and now we're moving into discussion. Mr. Harvey.
I, for one, would not vote in favor of removing this portion of the policy. The reasons that I have is that sometimes in closed meetings, we are discussing issues of personnel, and I'm just concerned that by electronic means, we might not be able to have the assurance of the safety of those electronic means. So I, for one, would be against removing this exception.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Further discussion on the motion. Dr. Carter?
I know that we have the capability of doing a Zoom that has the security measures in place that will ensure that a secure meeting, and if I'm wrong, I'm sure we don't have that capability.
No, you're not wrong. We do have the capability. I was just agreeing that you're not wrong.
Okay. So I'm in agreement to remove that statement, especially if generally the VSBA vets these policies, and I'm sure, and especially with our attorney saying that it does happen and other school boards do it. So we don't need to hinder ourselves and move into the technology phase of things if we are able to do that.
Further discussion? I see Mr. Harvey's hand again.
Again, let me paint a scenario for you. I'm online. True, you're able to track whether or not I'm recording on my computer link, but there's someone else in the room with me. There's someone else recording with their phone, and this suddenly then gets posted to Facebook that this was something that the school board was discussing about a particular individual or personnel. I just think that this is a dangerous road to go down. Closed meetings are set up for that particular reason, for security and safety of the subject matter.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Any further discussion on this matter? And I think we've all had our FOIA training. I think all of us are aware of the board member's responsibility in a closed meeting if, in fact, it is in person. Same dynamics apply. And a board member would have to acknowledge that this did not go as it should in a closed meeting. So board members in a closed meeting could have devices and other means by which we rely on the integrity of every board member, and there is a process when that is violated. Further discussion on the matter?
As a chair, you can tell in the beginning all the recordings are not allowed, and that's the end of it. You go to any court right now, the judges will tell you in the very beginning, no recordings allowed.
Okay. All right. If there's no further discussion, the chair does not want. Ms. Morrison, do you have anything you want to say on this matter?
No, thank you, Dr. Coleman.
Okay. All right, then, Madam Clerk, if you would call the roll. If you're voting yes, you are voting to excise or delete the phrase "except closed meetings" as outlined in policy BDC. If you're voting no, you're essentially voting that that language would remain.
School Board Member Evans?
Yes.
School Board Member Morrison?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Carter?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Brennan?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Nellis?
No.
School Board Member Dr. Sinha?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Gupta?
Yes.
School Board Member Mr. Harvey?
No.
By way of 7 yes and 2 no's.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. That motion passes, and we will go through the appropriate procedures to have that changed. That now moves us in our section here of new business to Special Education Annual Plan. Dr. Edwards.
Yes, and I'm going to invite Janine Daniels-Bosher, who should be on Zoom. There she is. This is the annual plan, so I'm going to turn it over to Janine.
Good evening, Dr. Coleman, Dr. Edwards, members of the board. This is an informational item only tonight. This is a draft of the Special Education Annual Plan. This is an annual agreement that is required between the board and the Virginia Department of Education for disbursement of funds, and it's contingent upon your approval and consent, which I plan to bring to the board in April. Lynchburg City will be applying for $2,405,794 in special education flow-through funds. Part of those flow-through funds for the 611 grant, $200,000 of that will go to the federal set-aside. These are for parent-placed students with disabilities in private schools or homeschooled. There is also a portion of the grant that will be for 619, and that will be in the amount of $64,854. And they will be used for different things for the preschool, Hutcherson Early Learning Center, for providing inclusion support in private preschools, staff development, and some other instructional materials. The draft is out there. There are going to be some updated numbers in the draft. The current one that is there doesn't have the step increase, so we're getting that information. This will go to the SEAC committee on March the 23rd for their review. Then it will go on public comment, and I will bring it back to you all for consent in April.
Well, I want to tell you, Director Bosher, you gave us a very clear, concise, and coherent report, and we thank you for that. Well documented. If there are no questions, are there any questions? We will govern ourselves accordingly with that report and accept that information. Thank you so much, Director Janine Daniels-Bosher. All right, that now moves us to K3, and this is going to require you to take a deep breath and get your best minds together as we engage in a conversation around our capital improvement plan roofing project for Sheffield Elementary School and Dunbar Middle School. Dr. Edwards?
Yes, and I'm going to invite Mr. Gatsky up to discuss this item with you. Mr. Gatsky.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Good evening. If you recall, back in December, we brought 4 roofing projects to you for approval. These 4 projects were split out into separate projects. And at that time, we had 3 contractors that won the 4 jobs. The contractor that had the low bid and got the contract for Sheffield Elementary and Dunbar West Building, after the contract was signed, has had fallen into some sort of difficulties, and it was decided jointly with the contractor and with the approval of the city's procurement office and the city attorney's office that it would be best to terminate that contract. So that is what we're doing, or what we'd like to do, and we would like to go to the next lowest bidder and accept the their prices that they gave at that time. For the Sheffield job, it will now be AAR of North Carolina with a bid of $220,850, and that's with a budget of $290,000. So we are well under budget there. At Dunbar Middle School, again, this is the west building. The low bidder there was Craftsman Roofing with $178,475,000, which or $475. That's the base bid and alternate number 1. The base bid was the low roof over the career tech area. Alternate number 1 is the higher roof facing on the part of the building facing 12th Street. We have the budget to do both, and so we would like to request that we get approval to go into contract with Craftsman Roofing for that job. And we are requesting approval tonight.
All right, thank you, Mr. Gaskett. You've heard the reports of our director relating to Mr. Gaskett, I should say. What is the pleasure of the board concerning this matter? Dr. Nillis?
Yeah, I have a question. Was there a need to go out to rebid these? I mean, given that the original proposals were December?
We checked with, we asked the same question of the city procurement office, and all our CIP go through that office, and also the city attorney's office, and we were told that we did not have to go out for a bid again, that we could accept the next lowest bids on both these jobs.
So there wasn't an expiration date to their proposal?
Apparently, we were okay.
Okay.
Thank you, Dr. Nillis. Mr. Harvey?
I was just going to say I would like to make a motion that we approve the proposal for replacement of the roof at Sheffield Elementary and Dunbar Middle School as presented.
Is there a second?
Second.
Seconded by Dr. Carter. Is there any further discussion on the motion presented to us tonight through Mr. Harvey and Dr. Carter seconded? Any further questions or discussion? Mr. Harvey?
I just want to thank Mr. Gatsky and his crew because clearly, even with going to the second tier bidders, we're still under budget. So thank you.
That is commendable. Any further discussion? Ms. Morrison, any discussion? All right, then we will ask our clerk to call the roll.
School Board Member Evans?
Yes.
School Board Member Morrison?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Carter?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Brennan?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Coleman?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Nillis?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Sinha?
Yes.
School Board Member Dr. Gupta?
Yes.
School Board Member Mr. Harvey?
Yes.
9 yes, no.
Thank you so much. Great job, Mr. Gasky. Any further discussion, Dr. Edwards, on that matter?
Nope.
Thank you, sir. Thank you for your fine work. Mr. Harvey?
Oh, never mind.
Oh, okay, all right. All right, board, well, that moves us to section L. Superintendent's comments.
Absolutely, and given the hour, I am going to be brief. I just want to thank all of the schools and the staff, the administration, for those outstanding Black History programs, celebrations, artwork. It was just a tremendous job. I was so inspired by all of the things. I tried to share some of those with the board where I could, that our students have done in honor of last month's Black History Month. I also want to thank the Black Excellence Network of Lynchburg for honoring me as the recipient of their education award, and that was a wonderful, wonderful event. And a very classy, they did it well. I felt like with the people that I was on stage with being honored, what an incredible celebration. So thank you to them. And now we're in Women's History Month, so I love the back-to-back. But this one is for all of my little girls, my young women, and my young ladies who are in school, who have survived COVID, who continue to wake up each day and give it their best. You may not know it, but 50 years from now, you're going to look back and say, I made history. I was one of those kids who, during COVID, mastered this educational system of remote and hybrid. I did it. I made it happen. I was persistent. I was resilient. So to all of my young ladies, stay strong. You are making history. You are being a role model for so many. So sometimes history is right in front of us, and we need to acknowledge it where it is. Thanks.
Thank you, Dr. Edwards, and your acceptance speech was exceptional at the Black Excellence Network event. This moves us now to M, section M, board comments, and we're going to start with Mr. Harvey.
Yeah, first off, I'd like to say that some comments were made during this board meeting, and I'm not going to get into particulars, that were in error, summarizing incorrectly something that one of our board members stated in a meeting. And I just want to correct that for the record, that statement was not made in that way, and it was taken out of context. I happen to know that board member, and I know that that's not where their heart was. So I just want to correct that for the record. And my final comment, I was saddened but also very excited when I saw the name of Ms. Karen Bell on our Human Resources report. I just wanted to give a shout out to her because she was 2 years old when she taught me at Heritage High School, but she has provided over 44 years of service. And I just want to give a shout out to Ms. Bell. She was an incredible foreign language teacher and an incredible IT wizard. And I just wanted to say I appreciate all her years of service.
Thank you, Mr. Harvey. Dr. Gupta.
I think you solved my puzzle. In your weekly report you had, in the award ceremony, you had some familiar faces. So I'm assuming it was Dr. Coleman now, since he mentioned. So thank you. No comments.
Thank you, Dr. Gupta. Dr. Sinha.
No comment except to say I'm very grateful for the hard work the administration and teachers are doing in a profoundly difficult time that's gone on entirely too long, but it is where we are. So looking forward, I think we can begin to see light at the end of the tunnel. Let's just hope it stays that way.
Thank you, Dr. Sinha. Dr. Nilles.
As a proud heritage representative, I do feel the need to acknowledge some results that are kind of hot off the press. Heritage's Malaysia Oaks, who is a junior, won 3 state titles in the indoor track. And Grayson Arnold, a special note, I think, concerned for the board, came up with the shot put title. So, congratulations to all the fine young ladies and their endeavors, and looking forward to hearing from her in person next time.
Thank you, Dr. Nilles. Thank you. That's great news. Dr. Brennan.
I'd just like to tag on to my fellow board members to thank the staff for all the work they've done, and also note that under the retirements, along with Ms. Karen Bell, are 5 other individuals, all of whom have worked for Lynchburg City Schools for more than 20 years, and 2 of them have worked for more than 30 years, and Ms. Bell's been more than 40 years. That's really such an impressive group of people, so certainly our hats are off to all of them for the work they did for all those years. And I just wanted to make one statement of appreciation for the community for the comments that they continue to bring to the board, and I hope that they know that we listen to them. I particularly want to make a comment to Jennifer Citizen and to Beverly McCloskey, who sent an email and had support from a lot of their families. It was a very difficult email, I think, for me as an individual board member to read. But I think they were trying to make the point that they want to support Lynchburg City Schools, and they want to do things to try to make us better, and that's what we all want. So even when it's hard to hear some of the comments, I think I appreciate them standing up and making those.
Thank you, Dr. Brennan. Dr. Carter.
And Dr. Nilles stole one of my announcements, Alicia Oaks, who's just been phenomenal with the Seminole District and the Region 3 champion, and also the Class 3 state champion, and all of the others that have done so well. And just want to also give a shout out to the social workers. This is also the Social Workers Month. Just to give a shout out to them for all that they're doing, especially now and during this time, and for all the staff and administration and employees of LCS that have gone above and beyond to try to make sure that our students are staying engaged and connected. Thank you all.
Thank you, Dr. Carter. Mrs. Morrison.
Thank you, Dr. Collins. I today watched the virtual performance from T.C. Miller, a celebration of academics and Black History Month. And it was sent to us by Angela Coleman, and it was truly remarkable to see this virtual performance, education through art, poetry, music, and dance. And it made me happy and proud and a little weepy. The kids had some absolutely wonderful things to say. So if you've not had the opportunity to watch that, please do so. It will lift your spirits. I'd like to congratulate the state champions from Heritage High School. We're very proud of you. I am also proud of the criminal justice students at EC Glass. They picked up their crime scene investigation kits and have begun their process of photographing, measuring, collecting, packaging, and labeling physical evidence remotely or in person. And I can't wait to hear about the completion of that assignment.
Thank you, Ms. Morrison. Mrs. Evans.
You know, I was going to acknowledge the email that we've been getting, not just from this past week, but the parents who come in here and speak, and the emails that we get, and from people who stop me around town. And I understand this is hard. And I think every parent believes their request is what's best for their child, and they're exactly right. And I think they have to remember, the only thing I ask they remember is we're trying to make a decision for the entire city, not one child at a time. So everybody is coming from a different perspective and a different life and a different view, and we need to keep all of that in mind, that everybody's view is different. And no matter your view, how you feel about this, the teachers are being amazing. Whether you want it synchronous or you want it, you know, on your own time, in person, hybrid, what I've seen from teachers, and I have a child in it, and I'm a teacher, is I couldn't ask for much more than what they're doing for me and my family. So I know every parent wants what's best for their child, and we get it, and we're trying to accommodate everyone. We have an entire city to look at. And I think when I sit back and look at what we've done, we've all voted every time with students first. And I think that's all we can do. We have worked so hard to have them in school all year, even though it's been hybrid. I feel like we were ahead of a lot of Virginia by having them in. We want to get them in 9 weeks. And I feel like we're doing the best we can for each student. And I just want everybody to remember that and appreciate the teachers and everything they're doing. That's it.
Well said, Mrs. Evans. Thank you so much. I submitted a written report, so I don't need to read any of that. I do want to acknowledge my eyes aren't as good as they need to be, but I think Mr. Harvey has on the same mask that I have. If not,
Yes,
this is Hutchinson, and this was given to us, and I just want to continue to thank all of the schools for appreciating us as board members. And there were a couple of that gave us some things tonight. Could you acknowledge those, Dr. Edwards?
Looks like Perrymont, because we got Rowed a Boat from Perrymont all together. And I think, is that Heritage? I don't have the black one on my.
Heritage.
Heritage Elementary.
So the gifts keep on coming for appreciation for school board members.
All right, so Mr. Gafford and Ms. Anderson.
Yes.
Thank you all both. They're both doing amazing jobs, and we appreciate all that you are doing to help us to feel appreciated, and we do. Thank you very much. All right, that now moves us to section N of our agenda, which are informational items. And if all is correct, as has been mentioned earlier, our Lockery meeting will be March the 9th at 3:45 p.m. via Zoom. March the 16th, we will have our all-important public budget hearing from 5 to 6. And the work session on the same day will be at 6 p.m., and that will be here in the Dunbar Middle School Auditorium. Thank you to the staff here for all that you do to afford us this space and our staff. The next Finance Committee meeting is going to be March the 23rd, as the chair stated earlier. Looks like at 3:30. And of course, our April school board meeting will be at 5 o'clock here at Dunbar Middle School Auditorium. In compliance with parliamentary procedures, there's no objection. This meeting stands adjourned.
Hey,